we got this impeachment hearing going on, and it's already stupid, extremely stupid. But anyway, let's go ahead and see what we got going on here.
Sitting president is not a fear-based decision. I am not choosing a side, I'm choosing truth. It's the only way to defeat fear.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve his time. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Oh, sheesh. Came in right at the right time.
Madam Speaker, I would yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Van Dyne.
The gentlewoman from Texas is yielded 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Today, I should be in my district working for my constituents. Instead, I'm back here in Washington because the majority could not resist another made-for-TV impeachment.
Oh, my God,
American
dude.
workers are losing their jobs and struggling to feed their families. Small businesses are being forced to lay off workers and close their doors. Families are tragically losing loved ones to the coronavirus.
I hate Republicans so
Instead
much,
of
dude.
creating or even saving American jobs or negotiating additional COVID relief, we're debating an impeachment that's been preceded by no inquiry, no meaningful debate, and no due process. In 1 week's time,
It's
Joe Biden will be
astounding to me
The
that
American people
Republicans
need
are
to
going
watch
to
what the
really
people
stand
do.
up there with a
Focus
straight
on their
face
needs
and
deliver
genuinely
real
assert that
solutions.
there is no good reason
Because the
for
majority decided
today's
we should
impeachment
debate
hearing.
whether or not to remove a sitting president in just 2 hours. I'll be brief. I oppose this article of impeachment, and I yield back.
The lady yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Bordeaux.
The gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I teach a civics class where I point out that our democracy is not self-executing. It requires people of good faith and ethics to make it work. The President has repeatedly challenged Georgia's election results, but despite 3 recounts and many investigations, the results are clear. Joe Biden won Georgia.
Right.
The idea that our election was fraudulent is a lie. Our
It is.
president used this lie to incite a violent mob
He
to
did.
attack the Capitol. I ask my colleagues to act with ethics and good faith, to reject these lies, and in this case to support the article of impeachment. I yield back.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is
Thank you, Madam
recognized.
Speaker. I would
Why
yield
do
1
they
minute to the
have...
gentleman
Wait a
from
minute.
Florida, Mr.
Hold up.
Pelosi.
The gentleman from Florida has 1
They
minute.
have the fascist axes in
In
the
our
background.
campaigns, we may be adversaries, but usually after the campaign season's over, we have traditionally come together for the good of our nation. Now, more than ever in our lifetimes, we are a divided nation. One of the
That is
reasons,
false.
the resist movement, which has harassed, harangued, and otherwise denigrated the president since the second he became the nominee.
Wow.
While his sins may be different than yours or mine, they are clearly not treasonous. Let our men and women in blue, who suffered a lot more stress than the members of Congress they protected, have the time they deserve to recuperate.
Oh,
and
my
do the
God.
same for millions of Americans who feel they've been disenfranchised. I beseech my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, if you truly want our nation to heal, vote no in this resolution. It reeks of nothing more than revenge. Sets a dangerous
Revenge.
precedent. May God continue to bless the United States of America.
Yeah, this is the
Gentleman
impeachment
yields
hearing,
back. The
Chanel.
gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Brown.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 30 seconds.
Uh-oh.
As we continue to listen and watch the
what is
House
this?
debate on the article of impeachment against President Trump, let's dip away for just a moment to
No.
hear from a Democrat who chairs the House Rules Committee. He's Representative James McGovern,
Okay.
joining us now, Democrat
I
from
guess.
Massachusetts. Congressman McGovern, thank you so much for joining us. How do you believe this debate is going? The outcome is known. We know there are enough votes to impeach the president. Do you believe
Yeah,
Democrats
first
are
president in
making
history to
their
be
argument?
impeached
Do you
twice.
think you're making headway with Republicans?
If they go forward with the impeachment.
A significant number of Republicans will vote with us. You know, look,
Wayne,
we were
thanks
all
for
here
the share.
together, on Wednesday when this terrible attack occurred on the Capitol. All
And thanks for the
instigated by
like.
Donald Trump. So these Republicans who are here as well, you know, watch with horror as that unfolded. And I think many of them have come to the conclusion,
And thanks for the host.
some belatedly, that Donald Trump is not fit to serve in office and that he needs to be removed as quickly as possible.
excuse me.
And that he deserves this sanction to be the first president in history to be impeached twice.
Congressman, so far, by our count, there are 6 Republicans who've announced they plan to vote to impeach. Do you know of more?
Well, I'm not sure who the 6 are, but I've talked to a number of Republicans on the floor. I don't know whether they're public or not, but who are seriously thinking of voting for impeachment. Look, Liz Cheney and I are polar opposites. I'm a liberal Democrat from Massachusetts. She's a conservative Republican from Wyoming. We probably can't even agree on what to have for lunch. But I have to tell you, I admire her courage in coming out for this impeachment, because I know it's based on principle. It's based on her conviction that as a member of Congress, that country comes before party, and that we all took an oath to defend the Constitution, and that's what she's doing. So I think there are other Republicans.
I almost don't
who
even
I
want to
know,
watch this
feel
shit.
the same way she does, and we'll see at the end of the day how many of them come forward.
Congressman McGovern, one of the arguments we hear Republicans making is that what is the point in doing impeachment when there's no chance that the Senate will take up a trial until after this president is already out of office? And our own Lisa Desjardins,
Big Richard
who
Lizard
covers
Man.
the Capitol for the NewsHour, has confirmed that Majority Leader McConnell will not take up a trial before inauguration. So what purpose is this serving?
Well, the purpose that it's serving is that we are responding appropriately.
Yeah,
to a
Chanel.
terrible,
America is
tragedy
definitely
that occurred in our
always a
country
mess.
as a result of this president's behavior. I mean, what are the consequences?
Yeah,
for this
you
country?
definitely
What
have
are the
problems in
implications if
Canada,
we do
but it's
nothing? You know, to
I
my-
don't think it's
some of my Republican
like
friends would
this.
say, well, let's move on. Don't
like
worry, you know,
with the
he's already
lobster,
fine. No big deal.
the indigenous
No,
people.
if
Like,
we do
I
not
don't know.
respond appropriately
Canada's
to
definitely
an
pretty
insurrection,
fucking whack, but
an attempt
America's
to coup,
easily the most whack country on the
an attempt
planet.
to overturn the legitimate results of an election. If we don't
Yeah,
respond,
I
this will
definitely
happen
hope he's
again.
impeached as well.
And by
He's
the
probably
way,
not going to, because
we
these
need to put
Republicans
Donald Trump
are
on notice,
legitimately. Hold on, let me turn this
that,
down.
there are implications and consequences to
The
his
Republicans are
actions.
legitimately sitting up there pretending like, yo, what's up, Justin? The Republicans are both sidesing this shit. They're sitting up there pretending like there's no reason, like there's literally no reason to impeach Trump, that this is just about optics, that the left has also incited violence because they keep talking about they refuse to stop comparing what happened last Wednesday to what happened over the course of the last summer. I missed the Florida rep. Spent his time talking about the fraud in the election. Sheesh, dude. Hold on. Let me find that. I gotta find that, because that's absolutely unhinged. Let me see if that's up somewhere. I'll turn this back up while I look.
There have been repeated protests by Americans on the left, whether it's in reaction. They didn't say this, but it sounds like they're referring to the Black Lives Matter protests. They are saying there have been protests in city after city, buildings have been burned, and they said essentially Democrats have stood by and not complained in the way they are complaining
That's
about what
from
happened
11
in the
months
Capitol.
ago.
Look, this is not about
I guess there
protest.
wouldn't be
This
any
is not
real
about
clips
whether
of it
people have
yet,
the right to
but
protest. This is about an insurrection. This is about an attempted coup. This is about an attack on the Capitol building, you know, the citadel of freedom
like
and
the
democracy
Republicans
in this country.
refuse,
You know,
and it's cool that the Democrats bring it up, but like there is a very, very clear difference between the worst acts of what gets lumped into the Black Lives Matter protests, because they weren't actually part of the protests. Like, if you talk to any community organizer who organized anything over the last summer, you might have even seen in some of my footage people like Kwame Rose who were actually going out of their way to go around and stop people from committing crime, stop people from vandalizing property, and even in certain cases turning people over to the police, which I obviously have my feelings about that I won't really get into right now, but this was all stuff that was happening
this is not comparable in any way, shape, or form.
during the entire summer, right? And all the most violent stuff happened at night. I had that conversation last night where I was talking about how
like that since 1812.
every single
So how
piece of
dare
footage
they?
you saw
And
regarding
how dare
last summer,
some of my
it was
Republican
totally
colleagues
peaceful,
talk
completely
about,
100% peaceful during the
making
day, and then
comparisons or even
once the
talk about
curfew kicked
unity
in, the
when
police
so
would
many of
hog
them
wild at night,
gave
and
oxygen
everything
to
looked
Donald
a
Trump's
little bit
conspiracy
differently.
theories and big lies.
Whereas
The reason why this all
from
happened,
jump
by the
last
way,
Wednesday,
is because Trump put out this lie, this
they
big
were
lie, that,
doing all the stuff
he
that
won the
we
election by a
knew that they
landslide.
were going to do.
And
There
there
have
were
been
too many
lots
of
of
my
people.
Republican colleagues who went
The
along with
PBS
that,
NewsHour
who
Live.
gave
This is
him
what I'm watching right
some
now.
oxygen
Hold
on
on.
that argument. And so these people who
3650.
came here, you know, believed what their president was telling them. He was telling them a big lie. You know, what
There
happened
he
is
is.
this got out of control. He incited a mob.
Is that Matt Gaetz? It's Matt Gaetz.
Most likely to be impeached. A statement yesterday, and I recommend every American read this.
Jamie Raskin.
Liz Cheney of Wyoming, the elected chair of the Republican conference, wrote, "The president summoned this mob, assembled this mob,
He did.
and lit the flame of this attack. Everything that followed was his doing. None of this would have happened without
All
the
facts.
president.
So,
The
shout out to
president
Jamie
was immediately
Raskin.
and
Salute Jamie
forcefully
Raskin.
intervened to stop the violence. He did not. There has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office. Request 10 seconds.
Gentleman from New York.
I yield an additional 10 seconds.
Thanks for the
An
like,
additional
Chanel.
10 seconds to the gentleman from Maryland.
Cheney says there's never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. Read Ms. Cheney's statement. Let's come together and impeach the president for this high crime against the Republic. We don't have a
Can I
minute
turn
to
it up? Yeah.
spare. He is a clear and present danger to the people.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates.
The gentleman from Florida is
Here it
recognized
is.
for 2 minutes.
Matt Gaetz.
Seems to me that impeachment is an itch that doesn't go away with just one scratch.
Oh my
It also
God.
seems that President Trump may be most likely to be impeached when he is correct. Before the last presidential impeachment, President Trump rightly pointed out the improper activities of the Biden crime family, and subsequently he's been proven right. And don't think for a moment, Madam Speaker, that we're going to drop that or stop our pursuit for the truth. Before that, we had the Russia hoax, where you had the president rightly making claims that Hillary Clinton and the DNC were colluding with Russians to disorient our democracy.
This dude is
How right he
insane.
turned out to be.
Oh my God.
And then we have the 2020 presidential election, where the president correctly pointed out unconstitutional behavior, voting irregularities, concerns over tabulations, dead people voting, and now impeachment again.
Absolutely
When they go
none
low,
of that is true.
We kick them. Eric Holder, former attorney general under Barack Obama, breaching the Capitol was as low can be. We all denounce it. But who is it that they're kicking? The president, who created soaring highs for our economy, rising wages before the pandemic.
That's false.
400 miles of wall to stop the caravans, who drew down troops in the Middle East and showed empathy for the forgotten
That is
men
also
and women
false.
of our country. It's why so many people love him so much, and it's why they're kicking all of us. This president has faced unprecedented hatred and resistance from big media, big tech, and big egos, from congressional leaders on both sides of the aisle. Before the rioters tore through that glass, Speaker Pelosi stood at that rostrum and tore through the president's State of the Union speech, inciting anger, resentment, division. Some
These
believe
people
that
are insane,
truly
bro.
these true colors are being shown now through this divisive partisan impeachment. The Speaker of the House, I would request an additional 40 seconds.
40 seconds.
Speaker, please. The gentleman from Ohio.
Madam Speaker, I yield the gentleman an additional 40 seconds.
4 seconds or 40 seconds?
Yep, 40 seconds.
45,
I think
45 seconds.
I thank the gentleman. The Speaker said to us just moments ago, words matter. But apparently those words don't matter when they're uttered by Democrats. When the gentlelady from Massachusetts calls for unrest in the streets, when the gentlelady from California brazenly brags that she called for people to get in the faces of those who serve and support the president.
Rudy Giuliani was talking about trial by combat on the
But
steps
make
of
no
the fucking
mistake,
Capitol.
The left in America has incited far more political violence than the right. For months,
That is not
our
true.
cities burned, police stations burned, our businesses were shattered, and they said nothing. or they're cheerled for it, and they fundraised for it, and they
Because the
allowed it to happen
police
in the
literally
greatest country in the
cannot
world.
stop
Now,
killing people.
Some have cited the metaphor that the president lit the flame. Well, they lit actual flames, actual fires, and we
Time
put them out.
expired. There will be order in the House.
I yield back.
The gentleman from Ohio, do you wish to reserve your time? The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Dude, Matt, what's going to happen to Matt Gaetz, dude?
Island is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, January 6th
The elites
was a
want us to
horrific
be
day for our
divided?
country,
I mean, yeah.
For our democracy. The Capitol
like,
was breached, the blood of a defender spilled.
we're looking
all
at the
because of a
elites right
lie
now.
That the elections were stolen.
Imagine
That
being
a
that
lie
mad
that
over wrong
infected
information. I mean,
this
that's
nation as
every
viciously
conservative, dude.
As the pandemic.
Look at the
President
people.
Trump
Look
is
what
the
happened
source of
last
that lie.
Wednesday.
He
Like,
perverted and betrayed his oath to defend the Constitution.
sheesh, dude.
Attacking
What
the
is
foundation of our democracy
the
by
fact that
inciting
you can just
supporters of
lie
violence.
like
He
that
is
with
not fit to
absolutely
serve,
no
and he's a
consequence
danger
whatsoever?
to our country while he does. I, too, pledge to support and defend the
gentleman's
Constitution
time has
against all
expired.
enemies, foreign and domestic.
The
I will
gentleman's
uphold that
time
office. I
has
will vote to
expired.
impeach President Trump. I urge my colleagues to do the same.
The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
What did the Speaker know, and what did other legislative leaders know, and when did they know it?
I skipped over the two
Maybe
black
that's
dudes. I just moved
a
up to the
rush
current
impeach
stuff.
The president, because so we'll never know what legislative leaders here knew. The FBI knew about a number of individuals that were planning a war on the Capitol, including killing police officers, and they shared the information, but nothing happened. The chief federal prosecutor in Washington stated he is pursuing conspiracy charges. The fact that IEDs were constructed in place informs me that there was pre-planning for portions of the tragic events last week. How does the president incite an attack that was pre-planned and already underway before his speech concluded? Now, I know my colleagues on the left want America to believe that the president incited
My
a
nose is about to
spontaneous
start
riot
bleeding, dude.
that
I
they
don't
like
know
to
if I
call
can
an
watch this.
insurrection.
I'm not gonna hold y'all. I don't know if I can watch this shit. My nose is about to start fucking bleeding. Holy fuck, dude. Holy fuck. Look. It's just, oh my God. Oh my God. Well, we're going to keep it going. I'm going to keep it going.
But the facts are stubborn things, even if you...
Any depravity too low? Is there any outrage too far?
The copium and the
Blood and
capium is...
violence too much to turn hearts and minds in this body. Instead of the usual justification, rationalization...
This isn't
and
even
enabling
cope,
false
though. It's
equivalence
cap.
we have to hear. This is a moment of truth, my friends. Are you on the side of chaos and the mob, or on the side of constitutional democracy and our freedom? It's that simple. That's what this vote for
The
impeachment
gentleman's
represents.
time
I
has
yield back.
The gentleman's time. has
Matt
expired.
Gaetz
The
grew up in a
gentleman
house
from
that
New York
was
is
used in the
gentleman
film The
from
Truman
Ohio
Show,
is recognized.
and
Madam Speaker, could I inquire how much
don't
time each
really
side
know
has?
what
Yes,
to
you
say
may.
about that, honestly. What can I really say
The
about
gentleman
that?
from
That isn't
Ohio has
already
25
said by
minutes remaining.
itself.
21?
The gentleman has 25 minutes
thank you.
remaining. The gentleman from New York has 31 and 1/4 remaining. The gentleman from Ohio.
We would reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crow.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, last week I stood in that gallery to defend this chamber against a violent mob called here by Donald Trump. I have dedicated my life to the defense of our nation, and Donald Trump is a risk to all that I love. Some of my Republican colleagues are afraid of the consequences of an impeachment vote, but this Congress sends our young men and women to war every day.
Facts.
I'm not asking you to storm the beaches of Normandy, but only show a fraction of the courage we ask of our troops every day.
Facts.
Leadership is hard. It's time to impeach.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman
Damn.
from New York continues to reserve.
He went right for the
gentleman
throat.
from
He said,
Ohio-
y'all care about the troops?
Ohio reserves. The
You support your
gentleman from New
troops,
York-
huh?
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis.
Oh, he's about to come with some heat. Look at him.
The gentleman from Illinois is
Look at this,
recognized
man.
for
He's about to
30
come with some
seconds.
heat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I heard a few minutes ago
Oh,
that
listen
there
to
had
his
been
voice.
no hearings. Well, I have heard from the people of the 7th District of Illinois. They have told me what to do. They have said, impeach this president. Impeach this president.
Danny Davis, I'm about to look him up.
Do it now. I will follow their instructions and vote yes to impeach this president. And I yield back.
Damn, short and sweet. He just say, I checked with my peoples. They told me. Dude, look at the fasci. Hold on. When it goes back to it, look at the fasci axes. Why do we have those in there?
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Escobar.
Look at my
The
man.
gentlewoman from Texas is
It's cold,
recognized
ice cold
for 30
swag.
seconds.
He's a member of the
Thank you,
Congressional
Madam
Black
Speaker.
Caucus,
On January
too.
6th, terrorists attacked the United States of America. It was an attempted coup and an insurrection, but what I hope Americans understand is that it was a terrorist
He voted
attack
against,
our
I don't know.
country.
He voted against
Those
counting
who
the
came and
votes
participated
in
must be
Ohio
found
in
and
2004.
prosecuted. Those who aided and abetted must be found and prosecuted. And the man who incited it, President Donald J. Trump, our greatest national security threat, must be impeached, held accountable, and never be allowed
Yikes,
to
and he
hold
fucked with
office again.
Farrakhan.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio
Yeah, Madam Speaker, we reserve.
Yikes.
reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Escher.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, future generations are not going to know the names of each member in the chamber today.
Why is she
in
giving the
voting,
mic a tuggy like
but
that?
They will know what we did and why. We must impeach the president
touching,
because
thank
he
you.
incited a mob that attacked the Capitol of the United States, the tabernacle of our democracy. He is incapable of honoring his oath and our Constitution, and he has proven to be unfit and dangerous. I will vote to impeach
The
this
gentlewoman's
traitor
time
to
has
our
expired.
country.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio
Reserve.
reserves his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Espaillat.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, today I cast my vote for the second time to impeach Donald J. Trump. He is unfit to hold office. He summons and dispatches mob to kidnap and hurt many of us.
The procedural language is extremely punishing.
He summons and dispatches mob to assassinate Vice President Pence, to assassinate Speaker Pelosi.
Like, it's
He is
brutal.
unfit to hold
It's like
office.
extremely
He summons
fucking
and
clinical.
dispatches a mob that waved the racist Confederate flag and assaulted this Capitol, resulting in the death of 5 Americans, including 2 Capitol police officers. He is unfit
The gentleman's
to
time
hold
has
office.
expired.
We must
The
2
gentleman's
officers
time
died?
has expired. The
I
gentleman
thought it was
from
just
New York
one.
reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio continues to reserve. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Garcia.
5 people died, and I thought only one of them was a Capitol officer.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in the strongest possible support for the impeachment of Donald J. Trump. When Trump made a last desperate attempt to steal the presidency, to reject the will of the people by encouraging insurrection, he became the first president to incite an attempted overthrow of the institutions he is sworn to protect. That is a horrifying first, and his actions necessitate another. He should be the first president impeached and removed from office in the history of our country. I voted to impeach him once, and I'm ready to do it again. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
One more, and then we'll go to you. Reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio continues to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Garcia.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, this president took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Instead, he has chosen to betray and attack our sacred democracy. This president violated his oath. He abused
Only
the
one
power of
officer
his
died. That's
office,
what I thought, Bug Pals.
attempted to
Yeah,
betray
Chanel.
the will of the American
They're,
people,
I guess
and
they're just like
incited
giving each other
insurrection
time. That's why they're only getting
against
like
this
30
very
seconds
House.
instead of 5 minutes or
During the
whatever.
last
Honestly,
impeachment
I don't really
trial,
give a shit about what a
I
lot of these people
reminded
have
all
to say.
Americans
This shit is
that
pure Schadenfreude
democracy
at
is
this
a
point.
gift that each generation gives to the next. We must do all to
the
protect
gentlewoman's
it.
time
For
has
our
expired.
children and our future,
The
we must
gentlewoman's
impeach
time
him.
has
Thank you.
expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stubbe.
The gentleman's yielding 2 minutes, is that correct?
2 minutes.
2 minutes to the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For 3 years, Democratic members of this body and the mainstream media lied to the American people that the Trump campaign colluded and conspired with Russia. For years, after an exhaustive investigation, it was found that there was no evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. Should Democratic members of this body resign for lying to the American people repeatedly and sowing division and dissension all across America? And it was all a lie. You have brought one article of impeachment to the floor, and your one allegation alleges, and I quote, Donald John Trump engaged in high crimes and misdemeanors by inciting violence against the government of the United States.
We got to do something about Florida. I'm being dead ass serious right now. We need to give that land back to God or something. Build a. We need to take that border wall and pick it up and move it
There was
to
no language in the president's
Georgia.
speech that incited or provoked violence.
We got to
In
do
fact,
something about Florida.
At around the
for real.
18-minute mark, he stated,
Because they're wilding down there.
peacefully and
They're fucking
patriotically
wilding.
make your voices heard.
And
You may think
we
that
really
he's
just don't
inciting
need that type
violence
of
because
negative
he
energy
believes
in
there
our
was election
lives.
fraud. That's his opinion, and he's entitled to that opinion. Just like all of you were entitled to your false and fraudulent opinion that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. The legal elements
Bug
of
Pals,
indictment
this
are
is
based
all
on the
dog and
Supreme Court
pony
case,
show. We all know
Brandenburg
that
v.
Trump's
Ohio,
not going to get
in which
impeached.
the
He's going to
Supreme
finish
Court
out his
set the
term,
standard
and he's
for
probably
speech
going to run again in
that could be
2024.
prosecuted without
And he might
violating
win.
the First Amendment. Brandenburg's speech called for violence against groups
I
of
would say
Americans.
we need a
And the
super
court
hurricane
found
for
that
Florida,
Brandenburg's comments
Spaceman
were not
Spiff, but the
directed to
unfortunate fact of
inciting
the
or
matter
producing
is that
imminent
all
false action.
these
The court found
rich,
that it was
fucking
protected
disgusting
speech,
slime balls
and
will
he
be able
was
to
calling for
immediately pick up and
violence.
evacuate,
That's the current law
and
of
all
land.
the actual
The
cool
president
people, all
didn't
the
even
working
mention
class
violence
people,
last
all of the
Wednesday,
people
much
living
less
in
provoke
poverty
or
and shit
incite it.
will be the
There was
ones
no
left to
crime
drown,
committed,
just
and
like with
therefore
Katrina.
no basis for impeachment, as you need a high crime or misdemeanor for a basis. You have created a mockery out of the impeachment process, and I urge all my colleagues
Chanel,
to
I
stand
think
against
our
it to fight
youngest
the latest
member,
fraud
and it sucks because of how
perpetrated against the American
fucking
people by the radical left.
lunatic America is, but there's actually, what's his name? What is that
Ohio
dude's name?
wishes to
He's a
reserve.
dude in the
The
wheelchair
gentleman from
that
New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished
when he got
gentleman
elected,
from
the
Nevada,
first thing he
Mr.
tweeted was
The
"Cry
gentleman
more
from Nevada
libs."
is
Like that should
recognized
tell
for
you.
30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the article of impeachment.
I just
Last
Googled
Wednesday's
wheelchair
events
Republican
were not just a
congressman
breach
because
of a building,
David Cawthorn,
but a breach of our democracy, a threat
This
to our
guy,
republic, and to
he's
who we are
25.
as Americans. Donald Trump incited
and
insurrection
he got
against
elected
America
to the
and attempted
House of
to overturn
Representatives.
the will of the people. We must send a
He
clear
sucks.
message that
He
committing
fucking sucks.
Sedition disqualifies
That car
the
crash
president
should have
from
killed him.
serving another day in office. I urge this body to vote
On Grand Theft Auto.
for impeachment. I will, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from New York reserves.
Talking about
The
video
gentleman
games.
From Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
There he is. Look.
Ohio continues to reserve.
Madam
The
Speaker, I
gentleman
now
from New
yield
York.
30 seconds to distinguished gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, last evening an 11-year-old girl
Censored
joined our
mask.
telephone town hall. Her question shook me to my core. She was worried about the future of this great nation, and I am too. That is why I must move forward with impeachment of this president. He has endangered this nation. He has betrayed his oath. I do this now for all of us, for our Constitution, and for this republic. I do this to tell the world that this great democracy will stand, and no one is above the law. And I do this for our future generations. I urge us all to unite and to vote yes on impeachment. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Huffman.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, history is watching and saving the receipts. Today, my colleagues across the aisle must choose which side of a very bright line they want to be recorded on for all time. On one side, lies, sedition, inciting and supporting insurrection, and domestic terrorism. The other side, Your oath of office, the Constitution, democracy, decency. There is no middle ground. Today we make history forever. So choose well. A vote to impeach Donald Trump means years from now you can look your grandchildren in the eye and say, I did the right thing.
The gentleman's time has
Facts.
expired. The
Yield
gentleman
back.
from New York continues to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
We reserve, Madam
The
Speaker.
gentleman
That's true,
continues
Bug
to
Pals.
reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Jacobs.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, the response to political violence must always be accountability. Without accountability, more violence will follow.
I mean, that's probably why he did that, Bug Pals.
In conflict settings around the world, and the United States Congress is now a conflict setting. A violent mob threatened our lives in this chamber and almost succeeded.
Ohio probably wants
by
to
the
speak
president
last,
who
is what I'm
broadcasted
imagining
lies
he's
about the
reserving his
outcome of our
time for.
election.
Because he's flipping
We
through hella
must
papers
hold
and
this
shit.
president accountable. It's the only way to protect our democracy. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York continues to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm certain
Look at this guy.
that every member of Congress would say that if they had been in Congress when John Lewis walked across that Edmund Pettus Bridge and the Civil Rights Act was passed, that they would have stood on the right side of history. Well, Madam Speaker,
What up, Boom King?
today,
Yeah, she has to recognize
we're
him,
going to
Brian.
see exactly what side of history you all are going to be on. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back.
Damn,
The
he
gentleman
came
from
with
New
the
York
heat.
continues to reserve. The gentleman from
It's
Ohio
always a
is
black
recognized.
congressman that just come through with the heat.
I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Because they know what's happening. They know
The
what's up.
gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
There he
Madam
is.
Speaker, today represents a unique opportunity in our nation's history. An opportunity to put America first, to put her people first. Today is a moment for members of Congress to put aside partisan politicking and place people over power. I urge my colleagues to vote against this divisive impeachment
Wow.
and realize that
Naturally.
dividing America will not save this republic. I urge my colleagues to not simply vote for what feels good. Of course, it feels good for the Democrats to have a united constituency for a few more days. But
If
I
this was
elected
Grand
to come
Theft
here and
Auto,
vote
I would
for
find
things
another
that
car and
actually
hit him again and make sure the job was
to
done.
bring much needed help to the American people.
In Grand Theft Auto, not
I
in
am
real
willing
life,
to
of
take the
course.
first step and extend my hand across the aisle to say, vote against impeachment. Vote in favor of a unified nation, and I will forsake partisanship and work with you, no matter who you are or what party you come from. Madam Speaker, I urge that we all vote to finally put America first. And with that, I yield back.
The
This dude is a
gentleman yields back.
dumbass.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
I now yield 30 seconds to a new member of the House. and a new
Mr.
member
Great
of the
Perfect. What's up,
Judiciary
Bernard?
Committee, the gentleman from
Long time
New
no
York,
see.
Mr. Jones.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 30
Needs to
seconds.
get lone wolfed? Yikes.
Madam
I can't
Speaker,
co-sign
I
that.
rise in support of the impeachment of Donald J. Trump, the disgraced, defeated President of the United States. There must be consequences for last week's treason and sedition. Hundreds,
Homeboy
if
from
not
Ohio
thousands
saving up
of
that
Donald
kill
Trump's
streak. Oh yeah, he's got all of his
Republican
crushing
Party
blows
aim to
locked
run
and
for
loaded.
higher office.
He's waiting for the
And
third
we
round.
And we must send a message that no one in the United States of America is above the law. The world is watching, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
In GTA? Oh, bet. Okay, Renard. Yeah,
Wishes to
back.
reserve.
Yeah.
The gentleman from Ohio is
Reserve.
recognized. Gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from
Trump
Michigan.
doesn't unify anyone. That's
The
the
gentleman from
thing is that
Michigan is
Republicans
recognized for 30
don't.
seconds.
They're
Madam
saying the
Speaker,
quiet
1
part
week
out
ago,
loud.
the President
They've
of
been
the
steady
United
telling on
States
themselves the last
incited
week
a
since
deadly
last
attack on the
Wednesday.
United States
They're
Capitol
like,
while a couple of dozen
all of these Nazis
members
are
of
getting
this
banned
House
off of
and
these
I
platforms, and
covered
I'm losing
ourselves in
all of
that
these
gallery
followers at the
away
same
from the
time. What
Trump
is this?
mob.
Why is big tech
5
censoring
dead,
me like this?
including
Like my
Capitol
guy.
Police.
Why are you telling
If
on yourself like
inciting
this?
An insurrection does not
They don't see people
warrant
like us as part
impeachment.
of real America.
Nothing does.
That's basically
I took an oath
what the gist of that
to
is.
uphold the Constitution.
Keeping Trump in
against
office is
all
unifying
enemies,
because
foreign
the
and
people
domestic.
that object to
Today,
Trump are clearly
I vote
not real
to
Americans, right?
uphold my oath.
The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve his time. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Excuse me, Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Wisconsin.
What?
The
Oh, he's in
gentleman
there
from Wisconsin
coughing?
is recognized
Oh,
for
nah.
1 minute.
I rise today to strongly
nah.
object to the articles of impeachment proposed against President
After they were
Trump,
all in there hella
which make the
close with
preposterous
no
claim that
mask on,
President
Marjorie,
Trump
is that,
wanted
I
or
know that's
expected
Marjorie Green
the
with that
riots that
censored
took
mask
place
on.
last week.
I know that's
He clearly
Marjorie
said he
Green's
wanted
fucking
peaceful
dumbass.
and patriotic demonstration. He did say he wanted people to fight like hell or we're not going to have a country anymore, but that's obviously standard hyperbole and was not meant to aim at physical fights.
I know for a fact that's
But
Marjorie
what is
Green,
offensive
fam.
is what
That has
you are
been Marjorie
saying and
Green.
inflammatory about
Marjorie
the
Taylor
tens
Greene.
of thousands of peaceful protesters who were
It
there
sure
last
enough
week,
is.
as well
Fucking,
as the tens of millions of people
I
they
hate
represent.
conservatives so much.
You don't
dude.
understand why they
How
were
are we
here.
supposed
They're
to?
scared
These
death
they
we're
aren't
gonna go
even
back to the
people.
days
They're
without
fucking
Donald Trump, of hundreds of thousands of people
giant
crossing
fucking.
this border
They're
every
crocodile
month.
monitor
They're scared to
lizards
death our
wearing human
nobody's gonna
suits.
keep our manufacturing here. They're scared to death that nobody else will fight the cancel culture as we head towards an era when some things can't be
Oh
said.
God! Hold
They're
on. Let me
scared to death
rewind
that
and
a
listen to what
majority
this
party got
fucking
here by
dumbass with his
teaming up
bowl
with-
cut is saying.
5 dead, including Capitol Police. If inciting
Talking
an
about cancel
insurrection
culture. Why don't you
does
get a new
not
fucking piece of Tupperware
warrant
to give yourself a
impeachment,
shape up with? You fucking
nothing
goofball.
I took an oath to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Today, I vote to uphold my oath.
The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve his time. The
And
gentleman
look at this
from
guy.
Ohio
Look at
is
him
recognized.
with the PragerU haircut.
Excuse me, Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute.
My man got the
Gentleman
fucking
from
fruit
Wisconsin.
salad bowl
The
haircut.
gentleman
Look at
from
that
Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
with the little part.
I rise today to strongly object to the articles of impeachment proposed against President Trump, which make the preposterous claim that
Glasses
President
all
Trump
fogged up. Look at his
wanted or
dumb ass.
expected the riots that took place last week. He clearly said he wanted peaceful and patriotic demonstration. He
Rudy
did say
Giuliani
he
was talking about
fight
trial
like
by
hell, we're not gonna have a
combat. Oh my
country
God,
anymore.
dude.
But that's obviously standard hyperbole and was not meant to aim at physical fights.
Oh, yeah,
But
okay.
What is
All right.
offensive is what you are saying and inflammatory about the tens of thousands of peaceful protesters who were there last week, as well as the tens of millions of people they represent. You don't understand why they were here. They're scared to death we're going to go back to the days without Donald Trump, of hundreds of thousands of people crossing this border every month. They're scared.
What
to
are
death
you
our
ta- Yo.
nobody's going to keep our manufacturing here. They're scared to death that nobody else will fight the cancel culture as we head towards an era when some things can't be said. They're scared to death that a
You
majority
can't say the
party got
N-word
here
on
by
Twitter.
teaming up
I'm
with
sorry,
Black
my
Lives
guy.
Matter, a bunch of founded by Marxists
gentleman's time
and that
has
dislike the
expired.
family.
The
Yeah,
gentleman's
get him
time
the
has
fuck out of
expired.
here, dude. Get him the fuck out
gentleman
of
from
here.
Ohio wishes to reserve.
Reserve.
Shut
The
your dumb
gentleman from
ass
New
up.
York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30
I
seconds.
wonder what his
to the
username
gentleman
on
from
Parler
California,
was.
Mr. John
Jesus
Mendy.
fucking Christ.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I rise today determined to fulfill our sacred oath to protect
My
and
nose
defend
is
the
about to start
Constitution
bleeding.
from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Last week's violent insurrection on the Capitol is a stain on our democracy. A riotous mob, incited by the president, stormed these very halls, beat and murdered police officers, planted pipe bombs, and left our nation shocked and in mourning. The president's rhetoric, actions, and refusal to accept responsibilities are an imminent threat to our nation. I vote to impeach the president. I urge my
The
colleagues to do the
gentleman's
same.
time has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
Gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is
Madam
recognized.
Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Christian.
all these
The
people are
gentleman from
fucking
Illinois is
ancient.
recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, my parents brought me as an infant to America because they knew it's the land of democracy. It's the beacon of hope for all the world. We called it the American dream. When Donald Trump told rioters to go to the Capitol and, quote unquote, fight like hell, he incited an attack on the Capitol and the ideals comprising the American dream. I'm voting for impeachment because I know we're still the country my parents believed in, and I will fight like hell for it. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman
God,
from Ohio
liberals
is
are so
recognized.
wild, yo.
Reserve.
They really
The
don't
gentleman from
understand what
Ohio
America
reserves. The
is.
gentleman
Even
from
though
New
you
York.
have these
Madam
fashy
Speaker,
fucking
I now yield 30
axes.
seconds to the gentlelady
Hold
from
on. Let me
Michigan, Ms.
tell you.
The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Chair,
on Wednesday the 6th, Democrats and Republicans hid on the floor, put on gas masks, and was ushered out of this room. We in this country cannot begin healing in unity without accountability and justice. The President of the United States
It's literally called a
violent
fascist.
insurrection against
It's literally
Congress,
fucking called a fascist.
you,
I
me,
don't know why I
and
didn't
the
know
Vice
that.
President of the United States. This cannot be ignored. Impeach now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The gentlewoman.
Look, there it
The
is.
gentleman from New York continues to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Lee.
This is.
Woman from California is
Yo.
recognized for 30 seconds.
What is everything happening right now?
Madam Speaker.
Oh, she's smart. She's
on
wiping
January
everything down.
6th,
She doesn't.
Donald
She's
Trump
taking no
incited
chances.
his white nationalist supporters to initiate an attempted coup against the heart of our democracy, the United States Capitol. This heinous act of domestic terrorism demands that Congress act to remove this president. Donald Trump has been and remains a threat to our national security and our democracy, and wholly unfit to serve as president. He and his supporters must be held accountable for inciting violence against the government of the United States. Congress must act immediately to remove this clear and present danger to our country. It's time to impeach Donald Trump again.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman
Weird,
from
huh?
New York
Real weird
reserves.
how they
The
just kind of
gentleman
have
from
those
Ohio
back
is
there.
recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Taylor Greene.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I am against the impeachment effort by the Democrats. President Trump has held over 600 rallies in the last 4 years. None of them included assaulting police, destroying businesses, or burning down cities. Democrats have spent all this time endorsing and enabling violent riots.
I knew it was Marjorie
that left
Taylor Greene.
billions in property damage.
I knew it was her.
and 47 dead.
Listen to how
across
fucking
the
stupid
United
she is.
States. Democrats are on record supporting violence when it serves their cause, in their own words, on social media, on interviews, and on fundraising platforms. Act Blue. Democrats support defunding the police when it's someone else's city, someone else's home, and someone else's business. Democrats will take away everyone's guns just as long as they have guards with guns. Democrats' impeachment of President Trump today has now set the standard that they should be removed for their support of violence against the American people. I yield back.
We should have never gave the boomers
The
Facebook,
gentleman
yo.
from Ohio
We should have
wishes to
never
reserve.
gave.
The gentleman from New
Niggas
York
should have
is
never came out with internet,
Madam
yo.
Speaker, I now yield 30
I said it
seconds.
before, I'm going to say it again. If you would have told me when I was like 14,
gentleman from
15,
Michigan's
learning how to
recognized for
steal
30
people's
seconds.
credit cards and shit on
Madam
the internet,
Speaker, for 2
that in
months,
another
Donald
16
Trump used
years
the
we would
biggest
watch
megaphone in
that
the world to
same
organize a
piece of
campaign of
technology
outright lies
drive
to
half of the
overturn a
country
free and fair
literally
election.
fucking insane.
On
I
January
probably would have
6th,
offed
he
myself on
summoned
the spot.
and incited a mob of domestic terrorists to fight like hell and sent them to ransack this Capitol in order to prevent us from formalizing his election loss. It was a grotesque orgy of deadly white supremacism, anti-Semitism, and strongman rule. Today, we will do our duty and vote to remove the author of this horrifying chapter and banish him from public service. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is
Can I
recognized.
inquire, Madam Speaker, can I inquire on the time again?
The gentleman from Ohio has 20 minutes remaining. And the
What in the
gentleman
fuck?
from New York has 21 3/4 minutes remaining.
We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from California, Ms. Levin.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, what
I guess
each
they're
of us
just giving
chooses to
each
do
person
today,
a little bit of their
whether
time.
we vote to hold this president to account or look the other way, will we be remembered by history, by our children and their children. The facts are clear. The evidence of Trump's insurrection overwhelming. History calls on us to do what's right rather than just politically expedient. Let us look back on this day with honor, not disgrace, knowing we were up to the oath we all took. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the Gentlelady from Virginia.
Gun culture in America
The gentlewoman
is
from Virginia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, the
part of
perpetrators
white
of this
supremacy.
heinous attack on our nation's democracy were Americans, encouraged and emboldened by President Trump because he could not accept the outcome of a free and fair election. His actions are seditious, and the president has
Like,
proven
guns are
that
fun.
he is
I
not
enjoy
fit
shooting.
to serve.
I'm a pretty decent shot.
History will look back
but,
on
like,
this moment to see who stood
I
strong in support
don't
of
personally
American
own a
democracy.
firearm, as far as anybody
As
knows.
my colleagues have said, we must come together. But our nation cannot begin to heal until
don't
there
get
is
it either,
a
The gentlewoman's time
accountability
has
for
expired.
the atrocity.
The
committed
gentlewoman's time has
last week.
expired.
I yield back.
The gentlewoman. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Clyde.
The gentleman from Georgia, is it?
Yep, gentleman from Georgia, 1 minute.
Is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in opposition to
He
the effort
pulled
to
the
impeach
mask
President
down
Trump.
underneath of his nose.
This
Wow.
course of action will only increase dissent and disunity across our country, and it flies in the face of all efforts to heal our nation. Quite simply, it is a shameful final act of political retribution, retribution this president has weathered since day one. I have no doubt that those who breached the Capitol will have due process and their day in court. However, there will be no investigation in the People's House into whether the allegation against the president meets the criteria for a crime worthy of impeachment. No evidence was presented. No witness testified.
No
cross-examination was
evidence.
conducted. No due process was afforded. And that sets an extremely dangerous precedent for the future.
Sheesh,
If
dude.
my Democratic colleagues were serious in their efforts to get to the truth, they would convene the House Judiciary Committee and investigate, but they are not. And so I am proud to stand before you today to defend our president from the injustices my Democratic colleagues are so giddy to pursue. I oppose this effort to impeach the president and ask all members of the House to do the same. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. McBath.
The gentlewoman from Georgia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise with a heavy heart for what our nation has endured. All those who've incited an attack on these halls of freedom must never forget that in every generation, Americans of all colors and creeds have laid down their lives in the struggles against tyranny, the fight against fascism, and the defense against those who would betray the values upon which this nation was founded. It is our duty to shoulder that defense of our democracy here today. The President's actions have laid bare
Right,
his
Vote Palace?
contempt for our Constitution, and he must be removed.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to
We reserve.
reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
The armed insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol did not emerge out of a vacuum. They were lied to by Republican senators and Republican congressmen and women.
The heat.
But they were incited to violence by one man above all else. Donald J.
Yo, look at
Trump,
her in the
who tried
background,
to
too.
be
She's
the
not
ultimate
playing
ruler
with
of
these
our
white people.
democracy. The world is watching. Our allies are watching, and our adversaries are watching. And we must show them that no one will rule this country will be above the law. The cameras of history are rolling. We must act. We must impeach Donald
The
J.
gentleman's
Trump to
time
show
has
the world.
expired.
Well, that's
that
the
we'll
crazy
stand
thing,
for
Fade, is
right.
that they weren't going to do anything to the Republican
Ohio is
representatives.
recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Utah.
The
gentleman
panic
from
buttons were
Utah is
torn out of the
recognized for 1
Capitol.
minute.
Sheesh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last Wednesday, on my third day, I realized that I can make hard and seemingly unpopular
Well, yeah, except Pence, but
decisions.
that's different 'cause
Voting
he's the
to
vice president.
strip electoral college votes from states is a dangerous precedent. Set by Democrats many years ago, perpetuated by my party as well. I heard nothing in those debates that justified such a high bar. A rushed impeachment will set a similar precedent. Without a single hearing or investigation, I simply cannot reach the high bar of impeachment.
The fact that they
To my
think that
district,
this impeachment
I commit
happens
to
in a
constantly
vacuum,
being
like,
objective in all of my decision making.
oh my goodness.
And as I abandon the remainder of my remarks, as I listen to this debate, it's no wonder our nation is divided. We are on an absolute race to the bottom. And I was hoping that last week we could have hit rock bottom. I commit to doing better, and I hope that we all can dig in and find a way. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds.
How did I get myself to remember Latin?
The gentlewoman from New York is recognized
I didn't.
for 30 seconds.
Thank you. Domestic terrorists attacked our democracy, urged on by a sitting president. These insurrectionists believe Donald Trump's lies about the stolen election. They obeyed his call to attack and literally carried his banner while storming the
They did.
Capitol. Last week's insurrection was shocking and tragic. It was a culmination of 4 years of assaults on our democracy. We must impeach this president, and the Congressional Black Caucus stands ready to join in a bipartisan message to the likes of Donald Trump.
Expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore.
The gentlewoman from Wisconsin is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, the president radicalized American citizens, and as his vice president fled from a lynch mob, the speaker cowered while people died. He watched with glee. That is why, even though it's only 7 days before the end of his term, we have the fierce urgency of now. 7 days is too long for him to be in power. He could declassify state secrets. He could monetize national secrets to foreign adversaries, and he could even pardon.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
The person.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York.
She's right, though. I'm surprised he hasn't done that already.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1
Pardons
minute
for all the people that stormed the
I would
Capitol.
yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise with great sorrow to oppose this second attempt at a baseless impeachment from my Democrat
Oh, my
colleagues.
God.
This week's attack on the U.S. Capitol was completely unacceptable.
His last week,
and the people
dumbass.
involved should be met with swift accountability. The president didn't incite a riot.
Yes, he did.
The president didn't lead an insurrection, and there are no high crimes and misdemeanors requisite of an impeachment. I'm not saying the president didn't exercise poor judgment, but to criminalize political speech by blaming lawless acts on the president's rhetoric is wrong, Madam Speaker, and a very dangerous precedent. The criminals who stormed the Capitol that day acted on their own volition. They are responsible for their actions. This is an important moment, Madam Speaker, for our nation. We have
And I guarantee you this guy would turn right around and talk about how violent Black Lives Matter is.
The votes are certified. President Trump has conceded.
Yeah,
Let's
Republicans
focus
are
on the
on a
future
different
and
level.
get back to the
Republicans
people's
in this
business.
country
I
are
yield back.
scary
Gentleman yields
in their
back. The
level
gentleman
of
from
delusion.
Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Newman.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor to speak today. So today I stand with this body to impeach this president. I agree with my Democratic colleagues. I also agree with my Republican colleagues. Let's unite. Let's unite to address this pandemic and start by simply wearing a mask. Let's unite to bring back the economy and start by putting $2,000 checks in people's pockets. And let's unite.
I'll take
to
$2,000.
hold these
Appreciate it.
domestic terrorists accountable and impeach this president. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, could you, how much time do I have, please?
The gentleman from New York has 18 and 1/4 minute, and the gentleman from Ohio, 17 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much. I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Norcross.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today at a time of historical concern.
last week on this very House floor, an attack on democracy, that symbol. But it was an attack from within. This very floor, let's be clear, cause and effect, rally at the White House, march down Pennsylvania Avenue, a parade in reverse, and an attack to this chamber. A police officer was killed. And what I hear is time to heal. He's not even buried yet. It's clear and present danger. No one is above the law. Not the president, if he has 4 years or 4 days. We must do the right thing for all Americans because he must be held accountable. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman
They could
from
bring
New York
whatever they
reserves.
want
The
in there,
gentleman
clearly.
from Ohio
Phones,
is recognized.
whatever.
I would yield 1 minute.
I'm surprised they don't have the tone in there.
Indiana, Ms. Sparks.
The gentlewoman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Look at Marjorie
Madam
Taylor
Speaker,
Greene all up on her
I
fucking phone.
appreciate a variety of opinions, but any accusations must go through the proper due process, whether it's election fraud or an impeachable offense. And someone
She
who
doesn't
did
even
not
use
support
swipe. Look
the
at her pecking.
objection to certification last week, I will not support
She's probably
this
tweeting.
political charade
Let's see what's up with her
today.
Twitter.
The rule of law and due process is vital to what our constitutional republic stands for. Congress should stop playing divisive politics and start working on delivering real good policies for the American people. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio reserves his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr.
The gentleman
Panetta.
from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
A week ago was the culmination of carnage caused to our country by this
This is
president.
funny.
4 years ago, he said he would stop such devastation.
You're wearing a censored
Instead, the
mask
president has
on the
continued to
House
debase our
floor
democracy
on national
with assaults
fucking
on our elections
television.
and incitement at
You're
the ellipse
fucking
and the
stupid,
battery
dude.
at our Capitol.
You're
American
dense.
exceptionalism is not guaranteed. We must always work to grow it, and that includes our work today to hold President Trump accountable. American carnage started with this president. A vote for impeachment will stop it for our posterity. I yield
The
back.
gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Pocan.
The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The U.S. Capitol has not been breached for over 200 years since the War of 1812. That is, until last week, when it wasn't another country that attacked us, but our own president. President Donald Trump asked his supporters to march on the Capitol, inciting domestic terrorism that cost 5 lives, including a Capitol police officer. And we all know, whether you say it aloud or not, Donald Trump is responsible for inciting the attacks in our democracy.
She ain't parloring because parloring's done.
Person protecting it the most. And for that, he is unfit
The
to be
gentleman's time
president,
has
and we
expired.
must impeach
Lauren
him.
Boebert's
The
Twitter
gentleman
is
from
locked
Florida,
right
the
now,
gentleman from New York
apparently.
reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 90 seconds to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy.
The gentleman from Texas is yielded 90 seconds.
I thank the
So
gentleman
that's
from
a
Ohio.
that is a big yikes.
The President of the United States deserves universal condemnation for what was clearly, in my opinion, impeachable conduct, pressuring the Vice President to violate his oath of the Constitution to count the electors. His open and public pressure, courageously rejected by the Vice President, purposely seeded the false belief among the President's supporters, including those assembled on January 6th.
Oh,
that there was a
they
legal
violated
threat
with
to the
this
president.
one.
It was foreseeable
They
and
violated
reckless
with that one.
to sow such a false belief that could lead to violence and rioting by loyal supporters whipped into a frenzy. Unfortunately, my Democratic colleagues drafted articles that I believe are flawed and unsupportable, focusing on the legal terms of incitement and insurrection. Even noting impeachment does not require meeting a certain legal standard, that danger for open speech and debate in this body and for the Republic is high if the House approves the articles as written. The language will be used to target members of this body under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It will be used to suggest that any statements we make are subject to review by our colleagues and send us down the perilous path.
Why do
of
people
cleansing
keep saying
political
2
speech
police
in the
officers
public
got
square.
killed?
We must end this. Let us condemn that which must be condemned and do so loudly.
Amy COVID
But
Barrett,
let us
she's
do it
laying
the
low.
right way, with deliberation.
She's
and
doing
without
hot girl
disastrous
shit.
side
You know what I
effects.
mean?
We must end
She's
tearing
scheming and
apart our
plotting
nation
on
by
the low.
social media and sound bites. Let us stop. Let us debate. Let us sit down and lead this nation together. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from New York, Ms. Maloney.
The gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, this vote is not about one man, one party, or even one day. It's about protecting our nation, preserving democracy, and the rule of law. The facts are clear and undisputed. President Trump used a litany of lies about a stolen election and willfully incited an armed insurrection with the intent of stopping the peaceful transfer of power. He attacked not just the Capitol, not just Congress, he even attacked democracy itself. That's why he must be impeached.
The gentlewoman's time is
and
expired.
I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Price.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Chairman, the President has engaged in conduct that is criminal, impeachable, and profoundly threatening to our democracy. He pressed state officials and members of this body to overturn an illegitimate election and to keep him in power. And he then invited and activated a violent mob to invade the Capitol and achieve his desired result by insurrection. If that is not impeachable conduct, I don't know what is. The President must be removed from office immediately and never allowed
without getting
to hold
assaulted.
office again. Our
The
democracy
gentleman's
requires
time
it.
has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last summer, the Antifa and BLM riots swept all over our country. Cities were burnt, businesses destroyed, and lives violently
Why do they keep
stolen.
talking about Black Lives Matter,
And it
dog?
wasn't just for an afternoon like those horrible hours we had on January 6th, but rather they went on for weeks and in some cases even months. So if there's any silver lining in this dark cloud, it's that our friends from across the aisle have come to realize that riots are bad. We conservatives have known this all along. This snap impeachment is a sham, and it didn't go through the Judiciary Committee, and it's not even about the president's actual words, but it's about how our Democratic colleagues want to interpret his words and fashion a particular meaning to them. Now, this is just political grandstanding at its worst. The American people desperately want us to move on and tackle the issues and find solutions to them forthwith.
That's
Madam
code
Speaker,
for
let's
my
end this
Republican
obsession and
constituents
charade.
who
Let's get to
were
work. I yield back.
supporting
yields
the
back.
coup
The gentleman
want
from
us to
Ohio
forget about
wishes
it and
to
brush it under the
reserve.
rug so we can go back to doing another one.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve.
Yeah, we reserve.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, now we hear talk of the president's notion of a peaceful transfer of power, which apparently means what? Minimal casualties? Now we hear talk of healing after the criminal acts are completed. Never as a criminal defense attorney did I say, Judge, yeah, my guy completed the armed robbery, but let's heal now. No, there was accountability. There was accountability then, there should be accountability now, and there should be impeachment now. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Reserve, Madam
The
Speaker.
gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from North Carolina, a new member of the committee, Ms. Ross.
The gentlewoman from
Oh,
North
watch
Carolina
that.
is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I rise today
Trial by
in
combat?
support
Yeah,
of the
hell
article
yeah.
of impeachment. The President's responsibility for the violence and insurrection that occurred last Wednesday cannot go unanswered. The President has had multiple opportunities to modify his behavior to bring this country together. Instead, he uses his power to further divide us. He is unrepentant. Congress must act for the good of this country. Madam Speaker, I yield back my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Good.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you.
Oh,
I stand
Jesus.
today in support of President Trump and against the sham impeachment proceeding
Oh,
with
God.
literally 1 week, 7 days remaining in his term. This is merely the culmination of a 4-year effort to overturn the will of the people and the results of the 2016 election. This is simply a political action intended to tarnish the legacy of a highly successful president who led us to an incredible economy, energy independence, reduction of taxes for millions, regulatory relief for businesses,
Wow.
renewed peace in the Middle East, and stronger border security.
Renewed peace
This
in the
action will
Middle
only serve to
East.
further offend the
These people
75
are
million
fucking
people who
delusional,
voted for
dude.
President Trump and further deepen the division within our nation as we try to move forward with a peaceful transition of power. However, the Democrat majority has determined he's already guilty and there's no need of a trial, and they therefore move forward quickly with this phony impeachment charge. Today, I join my Republican colleagues in standing against this further effort to divide our nation. Thank you. Now I yield back.
And yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the impeachment. It's very simple. What we saw on January 6th
LOL.
was a person,
Peace in the Middle East.
President of the United States, incite a crowd to come and attack their crowd.
That's a big
via
LOL.
Capitol.
Those are some big
We
LOLs.
have to make sure that we stand up for democracy. If we don't do this, then what are we going to stand for? We stand for democracy. We stand for American values, and I stand for the impeachment of Donald Trump. I yield back the balance of
The
my
gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 30 seconds.
On January 6th, President Trump launched an attack against the United States Capitol. I, too, urge my colleagues to unite, but to unite
Yeah,
in
Twan.
love
That's
of country
yeah. Half these
and to
fucking
hold this
dumbasses.
president
Yeah,
accountable.
this shit's
What
crazy.
unites our country is
I'm just
respect for the rule of
like,
law.
yo, you're just straight
Without
making shit
accountability
up.
for those who would shatter the rule
Oh,
of
she's got
law
gay in her name.
by
I'll listen to what she has to
overturning
say.
a presidential election, we cannot take seriously the cries of being a united people. This president remains a serious threat to our country and must be held accountable.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Okay,
The
cool,
gentleman
alright.
from New York reserves. The
But yeah,
gentleman from
they're just
Ohio
like,
is
you could just
recognized
lie
and
with
chooses-
no consequence
chooses
whatsoever.
To reserve. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Oh, he's about to come with some
Madam
heat.
Speaker, let me make everybody aware that on those just sun-bleached bones of history of many great nations are written those pathetic words, too late. They moved too late to save their great nations. Let us not this day move too late
The gentleman's
to
time
save
has
our
expired.
great nation.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from New York continues to
What a
wishes to
letdown.
reserve. The gentleman from
I saw his
Ohio
hair
is
and I just knew he was about to come
Thank you,
with some
Madam
heat.
Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman.
The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Oh,
Speaker, I rise today for two reasons. One, to voice my strong opposition for the impeachment of this president with 7 days left. I also want to voice my support for the strong police department. Many of you want to defund. Where was your cries to defund when you were leaving this office, this very room, last on the 6th? Height of hypocrisy. I yield back.
Members are kind
Yo, that's fucking.
to remind.
That's
remind
straight up
yourself
mafia
to
shit.
address
It's like,
your
oh, you
remarks
want to defund
to
the
the chair.
police? You don't want to pay us protection
The
money?
gentleman
Oh, well,
from
where were you with your not
Ohio
wanting to
wishes
pay
to
us
reserve.
protection money when we were busting your
gentleman
fucking
from New
windows and
York
lighting
is
your fucking
recognized.
establishment on fire,
Madam
huh?
Speaker, I yield 30
Total
seconds to the
hypocrisy.
distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Ironic. An administration begins by building an unnecessary wall on our southern border. It ends by making necessary a new wall around this capital. I introduced articles of impeachment in July of 2017 with one co-sponsor, Al Green.
David Scott
and again
doesn't
in January
like
of
online
2019.
poker? Yikes.
And on Monday night, I joined with so many of us.
And he wants to ban
these
same-sex
articles.
marriage? Yikes.
I've
Yeah.
introduced articles
David
of
Scott,
impeachment
not
in
a
the
fan of David Scott.
115th, 116th, and
The gentleman's time
117th
has
Congress
expired.
because Donald
The
Trump
gentleman's
has
time
continuously
has
posed a
expired.
danger to this
The
republic.
gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mass.
David Scott, one of the
gentleman
25
from Florida
most
is
corrupt
recognized
members
for
of
1 minute.
Congress.
Thank you,
That's a
Madam
big
Speaker. I rise
fucking
with a very
yikes.
simple question. On January 6th, thousands broke the law by taking siege of our Capitol here with us inside.
No wonder he has no idea how to speak.
Has
All he does is
any
take money.
One of those individuals who brought violence on this Capitol been brought here to answer whether they did that because of our president?
They were carrying Trump flags. They literally had Trump flags. What's he doing? What is happening? Is this a glitch in the Matrix? Why is everybody so fucking quiet? What is this?
It appears I will receive no answer. I will yield my time back to the gentleman from Ohio.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio wishes to reserve his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
My nose is about to start fucking bleeding, dude. Holy shit, dude. I can't do this.
I now
I
yield
can't
30
fucking do
seconds
this.
to the distinguished gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton.
Here, the gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 30
They really
seconds.
thought he went off right there. They really thought he said something. They were carrying Trump flags.
Against our own government, against
What did
our
he
own
say?
people.
Hold
It
on.
is a
I gotta,
shocking
yeah, we gotta go
betrayal
back
of
to
his oath of
revisit that
office
one.
and our
Because
American
that was,
values. We don't know yet if
wow.
the president will face criminal charges, but we do know he.
Madam Speaker, I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast.
The gentleman from
naturally
Florida
he's
is
from fucking
recognized for 1
Florida.
minute.
Can we
Thank
nuke
you,
Florida?
Madam Speaker. I rise with a very simple question. On January 6th, thousands broke the law by taking siege of our Capitol here with us inside. Has any one of those individuals who brought violence on this Capitol been brought here to answer whether they did that because of our president?
Like them carrying Trump flags wasn't enough? Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? New Florida and GTA, you're right, yeah.
It appears I will receive no answer. I will yield my time back to the gentleman from Ohio.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio
And
wishes
they clap
to
like he went off
reserve
with
his
his
time.
no
The
finger
gentleman
having
from New
ass.
York is recognized.
I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton.
Here, the gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 30 seconds.
Donald Trump is the first president in the history of this republic to incite a violent insurrection against our own government, against our own people. It is a shocking betrayal of his oath of office and our American values. We don't know yet if the president will face criminal charges, but we do know he must be held to account. Each one of us in this House took an oath to protect and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, even if that enemy is the president. We must move forward as a nation from these dark days.
Yeah, nobody's even
But we
allowed to
can't
answer because
move
it's his
forward
time.
without accountability.
The gentleman's
we
time
must
has
impeach this
expired.
president. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves, and the gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Chair, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Stevens.
The gentlewoman from Michigan is recognized for 30 seconds.
Insurrection, a violent mob. A week ago today, 5 people were killed, many injured, and everyone in this building forced to hide for their very life. The president was called for help. but he did not answer our call while our government was being taken over. He failed to lead and therefore proved himself incapable of doing so. Some may say impeachment is political. Some may cry it is divisive. But, Madam Speaker, our obligation to our Constitution is anything
The time's
but.
expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from California, Mr. Takano.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of the impeachment of President Donald Trump. The gravity of the moment demands it, and the fate of our republic depends on it. He committed an impeachable offense by inciting a violent and deadly insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. For this, Congress must hold him accountable to preserve our democracy, our Constitution, and the rule of law. He should serve not 1 minute more and be barred forever from public office. He is toxic to our republic and toxic to our democracy. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York
Facts.
wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
So, thank you, Madam Speaker. So Democrats can say, quote, I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, while there are uprisings happening around the country. But they impeached the President of the United States for saying peacefully and patriotically, make your voices heard. Democrats can say, quote, you know, there needs to be unrest in the streets, while there is unrest in the streets. But they're going to impeach the President for saying peacefully and patriotically, make your voices heard. Let's be consistent, all of us. All of us need to be consistent and condemn the violence all the time. And with that, I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from New Mexico.
We're really going to both
The
sides of
gentleman
this
from
shit.
New Mexico is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in opposition to these articles of impeachment. Political violence has no place in our constitutional republic, and those who assaulted police officers and forced their way into
The Republicans are
Capitol
just
responsible
memeing
for
today.
criminal
Like,
action.
it's just memes. So I guess
Leaders
that's
in
what they're
both
doing
parties
today.
have a responsibility to condemn such violence, whether in the halls of Congress or in the streets of America. I don't believe, Madam Speaker, that the American people have an appetite for this. They are expecting us to do the will of them, those who sent us from each state around the nation. Right now, Madam Speaker, we've seen this body impeach once before, trying to do it a second time. Two wrongs do not make a right. We have got to stand for the American people because we will not get a second chance to get this right the first time. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio.
As we listen to the last probably 15, 20 minutes of debate on the House floor over the article of impeachment against President Trump, let's dip away for just a moment to hear from a Democratic member of the Congress, of the House of Representatives from the state of California. She's Karen Bass. Congresswoman Bass, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us where you think this debate is going. What are you hearing today from your Democratic colleagues, from your Republican colleagues that you think sheds light on the argument about whether the president should be impeached?
Well, first of all, from my Democratic colleagues, I think most of us are still in shock, angry, saddened at what took place last week, and the way my Republican colleagues are trying to completely reshape history. And so I don't think that there is a question in one Democrat's mind that the president violated his oath of office. He instigated the violence that took place last week. He had a couple of opportunities during the time of the violence to call for a halt, to speak to the nation, to speak to the rioters, to speak to the people who were committing treason here, and he chose not to. Until he says that we had a free and fair election in the United States, as far as I'm concerned, he will continue to foment violence in this country.
Well, we are told the president issued a very brief statement this afternoon in which, among other things, he said he called on everyone to refrain from violence right now. Is that enough?
No, his words are hollow. The reason that was used for the violence was the lie that the election was stolen from the American people, that there was fraud, that there was cheating. There was so much fraud and so much cheating that he actually won. Until he dispels that lie, then the basis for the violence that took place will continue. And he has not denounced the groups that are threatening to come back here next week. And so as far as I'm concerned, what he did was very superficial and meaningless.
Congresswoman, do you have any concern that by this vote to impeach President Trump a second time, that you run the risk of further inflaming many of his supporters, even some of his supporters, who basically think that Democrats are out to get the president, and they're doing this in the final days of his time in office?
No, I mean, I think what inflames his supporters, frankly, they will use lots of excuses. What we are doing here is critical. There is a chance that he could be convicted in the Senate. And I think what is most important is to end any possibility of President Trump running for re-election or continuing in some other public office. We have to state unequivocally as a nation that he is unfit to be the president, and he should never be in public office.
That's why liberalism is dangerous, is because these people clearly don't understand that Donald Trump is like the most American president we've ever had.
Stoking division, stoking racism, and fomenting violence. We have to take that option of public office away from him.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what is your understanding of whether the Senate can take up a trial after President Trump leaves office? Because it's now clear, I think, from Senate Majority Leader McConnell that he's not going to do it before President Trump leaves.
Well, frankly, I think a trial should take place when we have Majority Leader Schumer in charge. I think that McConnell has also showed that he's not fit to be the leader, and fortunately he will soon be the minority leader.
He's the image of American capitalism, absolutely.
And so my understanding is a trial can take place.
That is America.
And I think it's very important that we do that, because if we don't, what message does that send, not just to the United States, but what message does that send to the entire world? We run around the world preaching about a peaceful transfer of power, and for the first time in U.S. history, we have a president that did not peacefully transfer power. And so I think we have to be absolutely clear and strong in our response to it, and that's exactly what we're doing.
At the same time, Congresswoman Bash, you have Joe Biden, the incoming president, saying that he wants more than anything for the country to unite.
Yeah,
he wants
Cruz
to
won't
bring
even charge him for calling his wife
move ahead
ugly.
With, the difficult
most countries
issues
already
that
consider us a joke. Yeah, absolutely.
Have to deal with right now,
because
the
we are a
pandemic,
joke.
the economy. How do you do that with the country right now stubbornly divided?
Capitalism's pretty fucking trash in general,
Biden is going to come in and he's going to unite the country. You know why?
I disagree with you in that I think American capitalism is the best representation of capitalism ever.
The way it has devastated the health of Americans and the way
we
that
have
it
the
has
most
devastated our economy.
capitalist country
And I also
on the
know
planet.
that President-elect said that he could understand in the Senate a trial taking place and
Karen
moving
Bass
his
is pretty? Yeah, I'd
compromisations
agree.
forward at the same time. The Senate is capable of doing more than one thing at a time. And then frankly, if you're talking about uniting the majority of our nation, the majority of our nation rejects white supremacy.
The other one?
And so I think it is very important that we are crystal
Her
clear
in the blue?
that we reject this. We reject what happened here last week. What happened here last week was illegal, and the people
I don't know,
that
dog. I'm from the
committed
county. He
crimes
just
need
looks
to be
like
brought
every
to
generic
justice.
white mom
That's
I've
the
ever
way
seen.
you unite the country, not by ignoring what happened or by saying,
You
let's
argue
just
we're not
forget
even
about it
remotely
and
close
move
to
on.
a free market economy? I mean,
and so finally, Congresswoman, you think it's realistic to think that this
So,
country can be unified, that people, not everybody,
define
but that
free
you can
market
get a
economy.
majority of Americans pulling in
look
the
how our
same
medical
direction?
industry
I
works.
absolutely
Well, I
do,
mean,
because
our
every
medical
American
industry
is
is
facing
more or
the
less
same
a free
problem,
market.
and that
You
is
know
the
what I mean?
coronavirus.
You get
And
to
I think to have
choose
a
which
president
insurance you
that is
have
steeped in
through your
science,
employer.
that is not just about his own self, his own personal wealth, his own businesses, and his family. I think to have a president, and just mark my words, I think the tone is going to change, because we as Americans are going to be reminded of what a president is.
The
how a
Voters'
president
Rights
acts,
Act?
and how
Nah.
a president
We still
leads.
don't
For
have
the
true
last
freedom in
5
this
years, we
country
haven't
because
seen
poverty still exists, and you can't be free if you live in poverty.
Representative Karen Bass, Democrat of California.
Yeah, I
we
mean, our
appreciate
country is
your
a
joining us. Thank you
quasi-oligarchy,
so
but
much.
that
Very
doesn't
good to see you.
necessarily
Thanks for
mean
having
that we
me.
don't have a free market capitalism. Like,
And now let's go back to the
the
House
freest
floor. What do you
market,
think there in the
obviously,
last
would be
maybe
one where
10
you could,
minutes
like,
or so
literally
of
buy
debate
other
on
people
the
as fucking
impeachment
property.
article?
Like,
After they finish this debate, they will go
yeah,
directly
Bug
to a
Palace, true
vote
freedom ain't here yet.
on the article. But let's listen again.
Capitalism
Back
is
to the floor.
antithetical to
President Trump's
freedom.
incitement to violently overturn
For
the
a
results
number
of
of
a
reasons.
free and
You-
fair election is an attack on our rule of law. Any president, any member of Congress who
If you come up with a
obstructs the
cure for
electoral college
cancer,
or attacks
then
judges and the
you
court
shouldn't
system where
fucking
there's
sell
no
it.
evidence
You
to
should
support their
just,
contentions,
you have a
undermines
moral
the public's
imperative to
trust
share that
and
with
confidence
humanity.
in the judicial process. How do my Republican
Like,
colleagues expect
I don't get how we
ordinary
wouldn't see
citizens
something like
to
that
respect
as,
and trust the courts in civil and criminal matters
like,
all across this country?
people
Think
die
about
from
that as
cancer,
you make
dog,
this
like
decision.
daily.
Vote
The
yes.
gentleman's
And if
time
you
has
came out
expired.
with a
The
cure,
gentleman
your
from
first
New
thought
York
would be, how much
wishes
can I
to
sell this
reserve. The
for?
gentleman
I don't
from
know. That's
Ohio
weird
is
to me.
recognized.
I can't co-sign that.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York
Madam
is
Speaker, I yield
recognized.
30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from California.
Selling medicine is evil. Thank you,
The
Bernard.
gentlewoman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I take no joy in voting to impeach President Trump.
You're using
But
that
this
as an
president
example?
has blood
Okay,
on
it's
his
a bad
hands in
example.
the
What
way
I
this
so
attempt
okay,
is
so
proved. The fact remains no president of the United States is
nah,
above the law.
Rockstar's cool.
And this president has sadly violated
so-
his oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As
What you're
members of
talking
Congress,
about there
we have taken that same pledge.
is not,
It is our duty to take this action and impeach this unfit and dangerous.
So that's like the
Gentlewoman's time has
the
expired.
mythologized, like
wishes to reserve. The
idealized
gentleman
version
from
of
Ohio
capitalism. What you're talking about,
recognized.
where you come up with something that people
gentleman
want,
from Ohio
and you
wishes
set a
to
price
reserve. The
for it, and
gentleman
there's
from New York is
competition or whatever.
recognized.
Madam
But
Speaker, now yield
you're
30
missing
seconds
two
to
very, very
the
crucial,
gentleman from
important
California, Mr.
things
Cannon.
in that
The gentleman from
model.
California is recognized for
Is
30
that
seconds.
people are not rational actors, right? Noam Chomsky wrote a whole thing about this called Manufacturing Consent. If you haven't read it, I definitely highly recommend you read it. People do not make informed decisions with their purchases. And that's across all levels of all classes. People in lower class and people in poverty obviously have very little choice as far as what they can actually purchase, just
The
as a
gentleman yields
consequence
back.
of
The
them
gentleman
being
from New
in
York
the lower
reserves.
class
The
or living in
gentleman from
poverty.
Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
But then you also have
The gentleman
things
from Ohio
like
wishes to reserve. The gentleman from New
food
York is
deserts where
recognized.
people have to subsist on McDonald's because there's no affordable grocery stores in their
Speaker, I now
area.
yield 30 seconds to the
And
distinguished
even
gentlelady
if
from
that weren't
Alabama,
the
Ms.
case, there's advertising.
gentlewoman,
Just like I said,
Ms.
you
Sewell
should
is
read
recognized for 30
Manufacturing
seconds.
Consent. There's
Madam Speaker, I
constant
rise
fucking
today to support
advertising. It's
impeachment.
part of the reason
I
why
do so
I
with a
eliminated
heavy
my
heart and a lasting and searing
terminated my
memory
Twitch
of being
affiliate
in this
contract,
House,
so you wouldn't
the
have to
People's
see an
House,
ad
right
every
up
time you
there,
came into my channel on
fearing
Twitch.
for my life. And why?
We are
Because the President of the
bombarded with
United States
ads
incited
daily,
others
like to the
be
point
violent,
where
a mob
the
of
true free market
in
would
this
be
House.
like fucking
It's
Futurama, where
It
they
led to the
beam
killing of
ads
5
into our brains
Americans.
when we sleep at
Blood
night, and
is
you have to
on
pay a
this
company to turn them
House.
off.
We
Like
must
that's
do
what the free
something about
market.
it.
That's what free
I ask
market
that we
is.
move
That's what
from
capitalism
stopping
is.
the steal to
Capitalism
healing.
is
Healing requires
water
accountability. And
being
everyone
a
must be
fucking
accountable.
commodity that's
Who is
traded on Wall
Gentlewoman's
Street.
time has
Like,
expired.
absolute
The gentleman
fucking
from New York
disgust.
wishes to reserve.
But we hand wave
The
that away
gentleman
away with the idea that that's the natural state of affairs, as if cavemen back in the day were trying to figure out how much they wanted to sell their wheel for, or their fire for. You know what I mean?
Is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I'm fairly new here. Actually, this is my first floor speech. But I rise to oppose this impeachment. You know, I asked my staff this morning, I said, how many times in our nation's history have we impeached a president? Well, they said up until this president, only 2 times in our nation's history. So here we are, 7 days left in his first term, and we're going to impeach a president for what reasons? For what reasons? There have been no hearings. There have been no committees. We must defend
of course he's
the
Obama.
right and protect the process of impeachment. If
Listen
we
to this
pursue
Bama.
this, from now on,
This is
from
why
this
my
day
family
forward,
got the fuck out of
impeachment
Alabama.
will always be a political process. I ask my friends across the aisle, they always talk about healing.
Nah, small businesses.
come together as a nation?
Speaking as a person who has worked
there
for a
has been
small business, and
hashtags
Bug
going around
Pals
our
will
nation
attest
that
to
not
this.
our president. Resist.
Small businesses
Members
could be
across the aisle
just
have
as
said
fucking
things in
disgusting
public
and shitty
to have
as
supporters of this
big
president
giant
attacked
corporations.
and demeaned.
And depending on
Thank
the
you,
people
Madam
who
Speaker.
own those businesses,
From Ohio wishes to reserve.
yeah.
gentleman from New York is
And
recognized.
what Mr. Vis Raccoon is
Speaker,
saying,
I
small
now yield
business
30
loans are just
seconds to
excuses
the
to give corporations
distinguished
money.
gentlelady from Illinois,
Just look at the
Mr. Kelsey.
PPP money and who that
Gentleman
went
from Illinois is
to.
recognized for 30 seconds.
Last Friday, I sent a letter to my constituents telling the story about the violent attack on our Capitol building, which is really like the temple of our democracy. I have now taken the oath of office, the same oath of office that the President of the United States has
You
taken,
can't have
that all of
capitalism
us
without
here
social
have
stratification.
taken. And he has
And
been the orchestrator
that's not
of
freedom.
this attack.
That's not a free
It is
market.
time to hold this
So
president
the main
It
thing
is
that Karl
time
Marx
and
talked
history
about, like
demands
literally the
that we
primary
give a
thing that
gentleman's
Karl
time
Marx
has
talked about
expired.
was, I'm gonna turn this down a
Gentleman from New
little
York
bit so I
wishes
can
to
get this
reserve.
off really quick. So the number one thing that he talked about was workers being paid what they're duly owed, and when you provide your labor, this is why workers' co-ops are the way to go if we're going to participate in capitalism solely as a transition towards a socialist or communist system, because the definition of communism is literally just a classless, stateless society, right? You look at Star Trek and they're like, how do you pay for things? And it's like, there's no money because everybody has whatever they need provided for them. When you have an employer-employee situation, well, humanity can't function as a capitalist society, period, because it goes against human nature. And I know that's an appeal to nature or whatever, but it's literally borne out in the fact that, you know, the original, like indigenous populations and prehistoric humanity and shit, where their form of like nation states and such were all based on communalism and like mercantilism and all that kind of stuff. So, well, this country should only be split because we have fucking psychos like the people in Alabama and Florida who get voted into power because the people that vote for them are equally as psychotic. And there's, I'm a land backer. There's a lot of land that should not even be considered United States government land. But what I'm saying is, as an employer versus an employee, you have different class interests. And I don't even just mean that as like rich people versus poor people. I mean, as an employer, and Hassan has said as much, as an employer, you want your employees to work the most amount of time for the least amount of pay, whereas as an employee, you want to work for the least amount of time for the most amount of pay. So there is an inherent conflict that occurs there. On top of the fact that your employer, your manager, your CEO, whoever, is literally stealing from you. Not even just wage theft, which is the most common form of theft in America, but is the least punished form of theft. But the fact that you, as a worker, your labor has a specific amount of value, right? You're providing a service that has a specific amount of value. And your employers, your CEOs, whoever, are skimming off the top, right? Hold on, this is John Sarbanes. Let me hear what he has to say.
Attack, and we will do what's necessary to strengthen our democracy. I yield back.
Okay.
Gentleman
He
yields back.
didn't
The
have
gentleman
much
from New
anything
York
to say.
is reserved.
Anyway, your employer is stealing from you in the form of profit, right? Because if you are doing all the work to provide a service or create a good, you should see the value repaid to you, but instead you have someone middlemaning you whether it's the owner of the business, the owner of the building you work in, whatever, that is taking some of that profit and pocketing it when he has provided absolutely no labor to create that service or create that
desperately need to
product.
better understand the two standards that are at play in this House.
A family says. Yeah, but there's still that inherent conflict where you want them to work as much as they can for as little as you can reasonably pay them, right? That's why we have a minimum wage. That's why we went through things like the Haymarket Affair and Blair Mountain, is because the class interest of the owner class, of the employer class, is to have cheap, disposable labor at all times, right? It doesn't matter if you consider yourself personally an ethical capitalist, right? It's like an ethical slave owner. You might be a slave owner who owns slaves, and you might treat your slaves really nice and really cool. It doesn't change the nature of the relationship that you have to your slaves. Whereas they are at your mercy, right?
But of course, the Republicans
they need jobs to survive.
To the American public
so they have to accept whatever terms you set for their job while you're extracting money from them in the form of profit.
Because the House Democrats are here to make.
That's why the only respectable businesses are workers' co-ops, because it's seizing the means of production. It's where the workers are the people who actually own the business and see all of the profits from the materials or the services that they provide and produce. Shout out to Harker Brothers Ice Cream, by the way. They became a workers' co-op during COVID.
That this was a pre-planned attack.
Delicious fucking ice cream. If you're in Maryland or if you're in the Baltimore area, definitely get you some of that. I might suggest the Honey Graham or the Coffee Oreo ice cream. It's fucking slamming.
We know that this was pre-planned, and it started while the president was speaking. Why is that not in the articles of impeachment? Why is that not being incorporated into my colleague's remarks? To complete the record, if you want to make the president the first president to be
yeah, that's true, but you can't. That's not something you could do. You would not be able to do all the things that your employees do by yourself. That's just facts. But your employees don't own your business.
30 seconds to hear correct?
Yes.
The gentleman has another 30 seconds.
Thank you to the president for
his
efforts to move the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and to take out Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and Qassem Soleimani, to eliminate the ISIS caliphate.
The Honey Graham affogatos? Nah, I used to just straight up make the cheesecake milkshakes. I would get the Honey Graham, mix it with a little bit of that cheesecake and a little bit of that strawberry. Make the strawberry cheesecake milkshakes.
As the president leaves 1 week from today, let's be honest about the double
standards. Set me right. Would have me shitting all shift.
And let's also be honest.
Because you know what they say, boss makes a dollar, I make a dime. That's why I poop on company time.
Ohio wishes to reserve.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished. I now yield 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman.
Yeah, but your employees don't own the business. That's the point.
Recognized for 30 seconds.
What happens if we get this wrong is written in Lincoln's second inaugural, when one party would make war rather than let the nation survive. On December 7th, on September 11th, we came together against an enemy from without, but on January 6th, we were attacked by an enemy from within, the president who would make war with malice for all and charity for none. We must come together in unity today against that domestic threat to our Constitution. The alternative is too unbearable to contemplate. We must impeach, bipartisanly, unanimously, if you have the soul.
The gentleman from New York wishes to reserve. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds. Distinguished gentlelady from Texas, Ms.
So
Fletcher.
you took the gamble to open said business, but you've already made your ROI. I would imagine. Like, I'm not saying it's a gamble or it doesn't cost capital to open a business. Like, if you look at a co-op that requires investors, right? Look at the black co-op. I'm going to watch an Alki video after this so that we can learn about co-ops, because I would really, really like for people to understand what a co-op is and how it works.
The elected
But
representatives of the people. By doing
Rockstar, if your business fails, your employees are homeless too. if just finding another job was that
That's not
easy, they
an
would have already
impeachable
done it
offense,
by now.
Then what is? Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back.
Like,
The
you
gentleman
really
from
think that
New York
employees
reserves. The
of a
gentleman from
business,
Ohio is
especially
recognized.
even the most massive
Ohio wishes to
multinational
reserve the
corporation,
gentleman
the
from New
only
York is
people
recognized.
that
And now
get
yield
golden
30 seconds,
parachutes, so to
distinguished
say,
young
are the
lady
people at the
from,
very
Michigan,
top.
Ms. Tlaib.
The
If
gentlewoman
if
from
people get
Michigan is
laid
recognized
off for
for
that
30
type of
seconds.
shit, they're
Thank you, Madam
fucked.
Chair.
They're even
In
more
Michigan's
fucked than the
13,
people who own the
we
business
proudly
because
speak
at
truth to
least as a
power,
business
even in the
owner,
face of a racist
you
in
can
chief.
say, hold on,
Those
it's
who
Rashida Tlaib.
incited an attack on the people's house do not get to talk
Dumb
about
fine.
healing and
That's Bay
unity.
right there.
They have torn this country apart. They have stoked the fire and then handed the gasoline to Donald Trump. Dr. King once said, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is in the presence of justice." Today, we must
Facts.
embody those words.
Rashida
And
Tlaib
we
come
must
with the heat.
understand that peace must be centered in truth and action. We cannot sit, Madam Chair, sit idly by after a violent attempted coup and allow lies and hate to continue. Today, we stand up for our constituents who continue to be harmed by this
York wishes to reserve the gentlewoman's time has expired.
Donald Trump.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from New York.
That's Bay right
wishes
there.
to
Rashida
reserve.
Tlaib. Don't cut my girl off. Don't do that. Don't do that.
And the gentleman from New York.
But
has
anyway,
3
so,
3/4 minutes
okay,
remaining.
even if you broke even,
Ohio
you could,
has
because
4.
it's your business,
And the gentleman
and you have
from
employees that
Ohio
work
is
for you,
recognized.
you could
Thank you,
not
Madam
set
Speaker.
foot in
I
that
yield
place
1
and
minute
still
to the
make
gentleman
money.
from North Dakota, Mr. Armstrong.
That's
The
not true of
gentleman
the
from
people
North
who
Dakota
work
is
there for
recognized
you.
for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What happened
Like I
last
said,
Wednesday
as an
is
employer,
absolute tragedy.
your class interest
And not only
is to
were we
have
part of
cheap,
dealing with it
disposable
now,
labor.
we were part of it
You
then.
would like to have
But
people
when
that will work for
emotions
you
are
for the
frayed
least
and
amount of money that
tensions
you have
are
to
this
pay them,
high,
but
process
doing the
matters
most amount of
more.
work.
It matters more now
In
than it
reverse,
did before.
employees
And the
would like to have
reality is
jobs where they
this.
have to do
There
the
are
least amount of
serious
work for the
constitutional
most amount of
questions
pay,
about this article.
which is an inherent class
And Donald
conflict
Trump is going to be
with
president
capitalism.
until January 20th. And on January 20th, Joe Biden's going to become president. But I'll end with this. I'm going to vote against impeachment, and that's going to give me credibility at home with my base. You're going to vote for impeachment, and that's going to give you credibility at home with your base. It's easy to point at me and blame me. It's easy for me to point at you and blame you. But on January 21st, we're all going to be back here. So use that credibility. Go back and talk some hard truths to your people. I'm going to do it, and we need to do a better job. And with that, I yield back.
Damn, he actually was low-key speaking some
Gentleman
facts.
yields
I respect that.
The gentleman
I respect
from
that,
New
man.
York
I respect what he just said.
Excuse me, the gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady.
But that's
from
an
North Carolina, Ms.
optional
Manning.
thing, Rockstar. That's what you choose to do. There's plenty of owners who never set foot in their business.
Lied to the American people about his election loss. He incited
Like,
his
that's a
followers
choice
to
you
attack
make.
our democracy, resulting in 5 deaths. His dangerous efforts to derail the peaceful transition of power were a violation of his oath of office. This president
Just like
is unfit to lead our nation
a slave owner
and unable to discharge
might say,
his
you know
duties
what,
of
you guys
office.
take the day off. I'm going
I
to pick this
call
cotton
upon my
today.
Republican
Does that
colleagues to
mean that
speak
he's
the
not a
truth to
fucking
their
disgusting
supporters
piece of shit?
And join me in holding President Trump accountable by voting to impeach. I yield.
New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Madam.
My guy,
Reserve.
I'm not saying you don't work hard.
The gentleman from New
I'm
York is
saying that you have an inherent
Speaker,
class
I yield
conflict
30
with your
seconds to the gentleman
employees
from Indiana, Mr. Murdoch.
that you don't solve by going to work extra hard.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, since the events on January 6th, I spoke with a group of ministers from Gary, Indiana, and they told me how they are praying for unity and
I'll
justice
say
in our
just
nation.
this, the
It
fact
reminded
that
me of the moment when those of us who were on the
all
House floor
of the
on January
elimination
6th
of
were huddled
poverty
together in a
that's
secure
taken
room
place has
after the
happened in
attack.
China.
The House chaplain Kibble
And
led
the
us all
wealth
in
gap,
prayer. Let us remember
the
that
wage
moment. Let us
gap,
rekindle
the
that
income
prayer.
inequality
For those 3 minutes
has
when we were
increased
all
only in
united
capitalist
to preserve our
countries.
democracy and justice. I support the article of impeachment so that we can move forward to do the work that our constituents sent us here to do. With that, I yield back.
Has expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from New York has.
And I'm not a shill for China. I'll say
2
flat the fuck
3/4
out.
minutes
Fuck
remaining.
China.
The gentleman from Ohio.
They're
has
treating,
3.
they're low-key
gentleman from
fucking
Ohio is
colonizing
recognized.
Africa.
Madam Speaker, we reserve.
The way that China
The
treats
gentleman
Africa
from
is
Ohio
fucking
reserves.
garbage,
The gentleman
but
from New York is recognized.
needs to be
Speaker, I
said
now
that
yield 30 seconds to the
they
gentleman from
are
Massachusetts,
the
Mr.
leading country in
The
terms
gentleman
of
from
eliminating
Massachusetts
poverty from their
is recognized for
population.
30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, there are more troops
Twan
right
said
now
low-key
in
question mark.
Washington,
That's
D.C.
funny.
than in Afghanistan.
Low-key, high-key.
And they are here to defend us against the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, and his mob. I would ask my colleagues to look at the faces of those young Americans defending democracy, defending us.
Someone
and
sent me a
find an
clip
ounce
too
of their
of
courage
a Chinese man
do the right thing,
that
as
was
several
going to an
Republicans
East
have,
African
and take a
country
tough
to
vote
help
for
rebuild
the
their
future of
infrastructure,
democracy,
and just how he
for the
talked about
future
African people,
of our country.
how they
Gentleman's time
treat
has expired.
African
The
people in their
gentleman
own
from New York
country.
wishes to reserve.
The way
The
that
gentleman
we
from
treat,
Ohio is
the way that some of these right wingers
Madam
talk
Speaker, we reserve.
about and
The
treat
gentleman from
Mexicans
Ohio
and
wishes
like
to reserve. The gentleman from New
immigrant
York is
workers in
recognized.
our country,
Madam Speaker,
that's how
I yield 30
Chinese people
seconds to
treat
the gentleman
African
from
people in their
Texas, Mr.
country.
Vesey.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, let's be clear about one thing. If we were on the eve of a Republican president being sworn in, and his Democratic predecessor had said the same thing that this president said, and incited his followers, his mob, to descend up on the Capitol, we will be joining them, not making comparisons, because guess what? I don't care about no base. I care about this democracy and this country. And what happened the other day should never happen again. And we need to stand up and say and do the right thing.
The gentleman's time
It's
has
liberal.
expired. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
You should probably
Madam
care about
Speaker,
your base.
The
man.
Republican whip is prepared to close for us whenever that is appropriate, so we'll reserve until that's time.
The
He
gentleman
did fire
reserves.
shots.
Madam
The
Speaker,
gentleman from New York.
I now yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Yeah, for sure, Twan. Yeah, exactly. They build the infrastructure, but then they fucking.
And so today, the insurrectionists
They're like, you owe us. We helped you build
will
your
be
country. You
impeached for
owe us. And it's
insurrection.
like, how the fuck is that
It
different
because
from
he failed
colonization?
to defend this nation against all enemies, domestic
Yeah,
and
Twan.
foreign. And
You're
he
speaking
stood
facts right now, Twan.
down near the White House and told a mob of domestic terrorists to go and show your strength. Be strong. You can't
You're
gain
typing
anything
facts,
because
rather.
of weakness. We must hold him accountable. We can heal this nation, but he must be impeached today. We must impeach Donald J. Trump as an
Gentlewoman's time has
insurrectionist
expired. The
to do
gentleman
that
from New
now.
York reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. We reserve.
The gentleman from Ohio continues to reserve. The gentleman from New York.
I guess they're letting
is the other side prepared to
Democrats
close?
speak first. They're literally just waiting to get the last word. That's literally
Thank you,
what they're
Madam
doing.
Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Yes.
I yield
the
3
gentleman
minutes.
from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to the Republican whip, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman
Oh,
from
God.
Louisiana is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank the gentleman from Ohio for yielding. Madam Speaker, our nation still mourns the unacceptable violence and anarchy that took place in this Capitol last week. As we speak, arrests are still being made, and the anarchists who stormed our Capitol are being brought to justice, as should be the case. Emotions are still high, but in this moment, we need to be focused on toning down the rhetoric and helping heal this nation as we move towards a peaceful
He
transition.
needs to
of
hop on
power
Grand
to
Theft Auto
President-elect
so
Joe
somebody
Biden
can
next
shoot his
week.
ass again.
My prayers,
Grand Theft
Madam
Auto on
Speaker,
the video
still
game.
with Capitol Police Officer Sieknick and Liebengood, who we lost, as well as all of the Capitol Police officers who risked their lives to keep us safe. They are true heroes, and they deserve all of our applause today.
You were not in any danger, and you know this. You were in zero danger from that crowd. The Republicans were in absolutely no danger. Mike Pence was the only one in danger, and that's because he wouldn't do something that he couldn't do.
Madam Speaker, I've seen the dark evil of political violence firsthand, and it needs to stop. But all of us need to be unequivocal in calling it out every single time we see it.
Here comes the both
Not
sides.
just
Black
when
Lives
it
Matter.
comes from the other side of the aisle.
Oh my God.
I oppose this rushed impeachment brought forward without a single hearing. And by the way, the Senate will not even take this up until President Trump is out of office. So let's keep that in mind. It will only serve to further divide a nation that is calling out for healing. Madam Speaker, many speakers today have invoked one of our nation's greatest leaders, President Abraham Lincoln. Maybe we should follow some of Lincoln's wisdom that he's imparted upon us in moments like this.
85% of police voted for Trump.
As Abraham Lincoln was giving
In
his second
2016,
inaugural address in March of 1865, Lincoln issued us a challenge. This is what he said: "With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind
Keep in
up
mind,
the
he's
nation's
quoting a man that
wound,
wanted to ship all the black people
to
back to
care
Africa.
for him
Abraham
who shall
Lincoln
have
wanted to
borne
ship
the
all the
battle,
black people back
and
to
for his
Africa.
widow and his orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all our nations." Madam Speaker, in times like these, let us not reach out to our darkest demons, but instead, like Lincoln, seek the higher ground. May God bless this great United States of America. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we can have all this, but we have accountability too. I now yield our remaining time, 1 minute, to the distinguished Majority Leader of the House, Mr. Hoyer.
The majority of the leaders recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman for yielding. This is a troubled time, a sad time. It is a time where all of us have stood almost to a person and lamented the violence and the assault on this Capitol and the assault on democracy itself.
I'll answer that in a second, Mischievous Raccoon.
It was right to do that. But this impeachment ought to be put in the perspective of what the Republican chair of the Republican conference said it was. She said the President of the United States summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of that attack. There has never been, she said, a greater betrayal by a President of the United States of this office, of his office, and his oath to the Constitution. That is why we are here today. That is why we are here today, just a week before that president, at the request of the American people, will leave
Not
office.
even Nixon.
And the issue is, what do we do? The 433 of us, I believe, who are here, do on behalf of the American people to respond to what Representative Cheney described happened on the 6th of January.
John
A
Mize Jr.,
mob
thanks for the like.
Assembled by, summoned by, and then spoken to light the flame of the attack. To stop the steal. As we sat here, exercising our constitutional duty, and to his great credit, the Vice President of the United States following the Constitution of the United States of America, notwithstanding the fact that he was opportuned by the president not to do so. That mob sent by the president to stop the steal did so for a few hours. Not the steal, but the constitutional duty that we had. And so we ask ourselves, what do we do? What is our responsibility? What should we say in light of only the Civil War has an analogy? That doesn't mean there haven't been demonstrations in Washington before and demonstrations throughout this country before. But it is the first and only physical presence other than the 9/11 attack on this nation, which came from abroad.
That's right. Last Wednesday,
And had
for
a
people
plane
who don't
aimed
understand
at
just
our
how serious last Wednesday
Capitol
was,
Dome.
last Wednesday is the most serious shit since 9/11.
This attack was not from abroad. It was, as Liz Cheney said, summoned, assembled, and inflamed by the President of the United States of
Like,
America.
I don't think people realize or understand just how
Who, in
close
Liz
those people
Cheney
came to
said
straight up kidnapping and
words
potentially
that there
assassinating
has
actual
never
heads
been
of state
a
in this
greater
country.
betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. I pride myself as a member of this Congress who for 40 years has worked in a bipartisan fashion with many of your leaders and do to this day. But are we to remain silent in the face of Liz Cheney's saying this was the greatest betrayal of the duty of the President of the United States in history? Are we to stand silent? Will we stand silent? Will we not stand up and say, this is not acceptable? Madam Speaker, for 4 years, Donald Trump has made no effort to hide his ambitions or his lacking of Republican principles. Not our principles.
I didn't forget your question either,
but
Bishop
the
is recommending
principles
I'll
that
answer in a
Abraham
second. I'm just
Lincoln was
listening to
just
him really
quoted
quick.
as having said, your president, our president, has never displayed those in the 4 years he's been president of the United States. He has allowed a little constraint on his
Rogue has a
worst
2v2 now,
inclinations.
bet.
His
Now I'm actually
desire
going to play
for
Rogue.
autocracy and his glorification of violence have not been tempered, but rationalized by those who sought to profit financially and politically from their proximity to power. Upon the foundations of virtue, reason, and patient wisdom laid down by George Washington as our first president, Donald Trump has constructed a glass palace of lies, fear-mongering,
Yeah, that shit was wild,
and
Twan.
sedition. Last Wednesday, on January 6th, the nation and the world watched it shatter to pieces. There can be no mistaking any longer the kind of man sitting in the Oval Office or his intentions and capabilities. The curtain has been pulled back. The office to which he was elected could not temper or reform him. Washington's legacy was passed down to us not as written
Temperature
decrees. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman's correct. The House will be in order. The gentleman-
Washington's legacy was passed down to us not as written decrees, but understood norms. How we ought to act, how we ought to conduct ourselves. Term after term, each occupant has observed those norms out of a recognition that our Constitution's articles are not the only preservative of our democracy. For more than 2 centuries, Madam Speaker, whenever those norms were tested and strained, good and virtuous citizens on both sides of the aisle found common purpose in reaffirming those norms. But
98
memory
degrees.
fades, and from time to time it must be refreshed. Madam Speaker, as the framers
No
emerged
fever.
from the Constitution Convention, Benjamin Franklin was asked whether they had made America a monarchy or a republic. Probably all of us know this response.
A republic is not a democracy, by the way.
He answered, if
You can have a democratic
keep it.
republic, but you still have a representative.
That's the question today. If we can keep it. And the way we keep it is to say no to actions and words that do not promote the keeping
What's
of
up,
that
Hobbs?
republic. For millennia, people have understood that a republic is only as stable as, and lasting as the citizens and leaders who commit themselves to its upkeep. This president has shown us he's not committed to that project. His tweets every day have shown he is not committed to that project. Indeed, he openly disdains it and appears to prefer the alternative. But what of the rest of us? Those of who have the honor and the great privilege.
You need some milk,
and
Cam.
the
Sound like you
weighty
need some milk.
responsibility to represent the views of 750,000 of our fellow citizens. We in this Congress have an opportunity, no, a duty, to demonstrate our commitment, both as leaders and as citizens, to keeping America a republic. A republic that resolves its differences not through being ordered to come to the Capitol to prevent
Keep in mind, a
them
republic is not a democracy.
stealing the
We have a
election,
democratic republic. We don't have a direct
which was an
democracy.
absurd
You cannot walk
assertion
into the Senate
from
and
the
start
very
writing your own
first
laws.
day it was
You have to
made.
vote for a representative.
We cannot erase the last 4 years, Madam Speaker. We cannot turn back the clock. But we can look to the ideals and principles inherited from great presidents like Washington, like Jefferson, and yes, certainly like Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt, and from outstanding Americans like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Susan Anthony, Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, our beloved
Abraham Lincoln
John
would have
Lewis,
hated all those people.
and yes, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who taught us a lot about equality and inclusion. It's up to us to restore the vibrancy, Madam Speaker, of our democracy by reaffirming our commitment to the norms they passed on to us and entrusted to our care. But to make that possible, Madam Speaker, we must rise to this moment and not only affirm the virtues we cherish, but reject the vices we abhor. That's what I'm asking my fellow representatives on both sides of the aisle to do today. We all stood and we abhorred the violence that occurred and the threat to the very democracy that we hold so dear and swore an oath to protect and uphold. Reject deceit. Reject fear-mongering. Reject sedition, tyranny, and insurrection. Reject the demand for fealty to one man over fidelity to one's country. When I addressed the House during the debate over the articles of impeachment in December 2019, I said
Yeah, this
the
dude's
following.
going to talk for a break. I
We
might
need
just
not
get
ask
into what I'm trying to say because he's
Who will
not
be
saying
the first
anything.
to show our courage by standing up to President Trump? The question we must ask, who will be the last to find it? Senator McConnell, Representative Cheney, a number of other representatives who have spoken on this
RBG
floor
mural on
with great
28th.
courage.
Yeah, that's where it would be. I did live in Remington pre-R. I
there is
actually
much
watched
fear of
them
Donald Trump.
demolish that old
There's
mill
much
or whatever
fear
it
of
was
Donald
to
Trump's
build those
tweets.
condos.
There's much fear of Donald
I
Trump's
did live in Remington briefly, but I
retribution
did live there.
for opposition. In my
Pre-gentrification.
view, Donald Trump demands absolute loyalty. and gives
Billy, one of my
none
best
in
friends, lived
return.
there for years.
I hope others will join Liz Cheney. I hope others will be honest with themselves and with their constituents. As
I
Liz
just want to
Cheney
hear how
was
nuts
saying,
the Republican
there has never
leader
been a
is gonna
greater
be.
betrayal
Well,
by a
Steve
president of the
Scalise is
United
already
States of
nuts.
his office and his oath to the Constitution. Don't dismiss that. She's the daughter of a vice president of the United States who was the whip when I came to Congress. As she has taken a stand, I hope others will as well, Madam Speaker. Soon, the clerk will call the roll and ask for our votes. Make no mistake, this will be no ordinary roll call. This is about our country, our Constitution, and our democracy. These votes will be inscribed on the roll of history, a record of courage and of our commitment to country and Constitution, of our commitment to the rule of law and renewal of that which we inherited and hope to pass on, unbroken, unshattered. With just 7 days left in the president's term, this vote is not about timing. It is about principle and fidelity to our Constitution. It concerns the clear
Neighbor's
and
kids
present
upstairs
danger
just stomping
facing our
around.
country,
Sorry.
not only in these final days of the Trump administration, but in the weeks, months, and years that will follow. It is about the necessity to demonstrate to this generation and to future generations the duty we share to protect our democracy every single day. Do not pretend, my friends, that it was simply those who came into the Capitol, encouraged by our president to stop the steal at any cost. And by the way, if the vice president doesn't do my bidding and follows the Constitution, sweep him away. We know that this president would never emulate George Washington and give up his power for the good of our republic, even after losing an election. Somebody talked about a peaceful transition. There has not been a peaceful transition. I don't know what you're talking about. You're not living in the same country I am.
Heat. That heat.
It was just days ago that the president, after committing this terrible act, thought he had to admit that Joe Biden might, yes, be president of the United States. We know that this president neither recognizes norms nor reflects the rule of law. We know that this president is not a patriot. So I ask this House, who among us, Madam Speaker, will be recorded on the roll of history for their courage, their commitment, the Constitution, and their country? We do this today not for politics. We don't need this for politics. Georgia showed that. There was no mistake in this election. We do this today to preserve and protect this great democracy. We do it for the America we love, our America the beautiful, whose founders' sacrifices we praise in song. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life.
Fuck George Washington and definitely fuck Lincoln. I'm going to tell you why fuck Lincoln in a minute.
Madam President,
I want to address
Speaker,
Mischievous Raccoon's question.
as our current president, the appropriate words would be, who less than self his country loved, and victory more than truth. Vote for this, for America, for our Constitution, for democracy, for history. I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired.
Okay.
Pursuant to House Resolution 41, the previous question is ordered on the resolution. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized. For what reason?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We'd ask for a roll call vote.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by an electronic device.
So they're going to vote.
So, for what may be
We're going to come
the
back.
second
I'm going
time
to
in
mute this so we can talk about. So Mischievous Raccoon asked a very important question. He asked if I agreed that Africans should have been returned to their original country after being enslaved in America. And to that question, I would posit that I believe that Africans, the continent of Africa should not have been colonized in the first place, clearly. But I would say no. And I want to talk about the American Colonization Society, because I know I've been saying fuck Lincoln, and Justin right there is just saying Lincoln didn't give a fuck about black people. I'm sure by this point we are familiar with what is known in America as the alt-right, which is basically diet white supremacy. What is not known to a lot of people, however, is that that particular form of diet white supremacy, the desire to form a peaceful white ethno-state, is absolutely not a new point of view. In fact, when we look at the American Colonization Society here, what they were was essentially, if you heard of the Back to Africa movement, this is essentially like the bastardized, fucking demonized version of that, which was the ship all the Negroes back to Africa movement. The conventional wisdom, what we're propagandized with when we learn about American history, especially surrounding the Civil War, is that there were two sides, right? The North versus the South. The pro-slavery Confederacy in the South, and the abolitionist Yankee Doodle dandy good old boys of the North, when really there were actually three separate factions. The true abolitionists that were white men were people like John Brown, who was executed, the first person in America executed for treason. Google John Brown if you don't know who John Brown is. Very, very recommended reading. But the third faction was members of this here, the American Colonization Society, which was essentially the belief that we'll check out the Republic of Maryland, which is America's only colony, America's only foreign colony in West Africa. The capital is Liberia, I believe. I'm sorry. Yep, Liberia. And this was essentially the same alt-right Kool-Aid, the belief that America is intrinsically a white man's country. After we exterminate all of the Indians, get all the Indians the fuck out of here, we need to free the slaves, but not for any altruistic reason, because we recognize Negroes as people with their own rights and desires, but because we believe that only white people should be in America. All that work that slaves do, white people could do that, just like with alt-righters talking about all the work that undocumented immigrants and the like do. White people should do all of that work. They had the same exact beliefs. They wanted to send all of the black people, all of the freedmen from America, back to the Republic of Maryland in Africa. We'll just read a little bit about this just really quick. The American Colonization Society, originally known as the Society for the Colonization of Free People of Color of America, was founded in 1816 by Robert Finley to encourage and support the migration of free African Americans to the continent of Africa. There were several factors that led to the establishment of the American Colonization Society. The number of free people of color grew steadily following the American Revolutionary War. So this is after the American Revolutionary War. From 60,000 in 1790 to 300,000 by 1830. Consequently, slave owners grew increasingly concerned that free blacks might encourage or help their slaves to escape or rebel. In addition, many white Americans saw African Americans as racially inferior and felt that amalgamation or integration, modern word, you might consider that miscegenation, of African Americans with mainstream American culture was impossible, right? So it's the alt-right line. Black people just have a different culture. It's not compatible with American culture, which is white culture, right? This reinforced the notion that African Americans should be relocated to somewhere they could live free of white prejudice. And there was always, and there's that disgusting pseudo-altruistic slant where they think that they're deporting all the African Americans for their own good, because clearly they're going to be subject to persecution here in America. So just send them back to Africa where they won't have to deal with that, right? The African community and abolitionist movement, if I could speak English, the African American community and abolitionist movement were overwhelmingly opposed to the project. In most cases, their families had lived in the United States for generations, and their prevailing sentiment was that they were no more African than white Americans were British, which is true. Contrary to stated claims that emigration was voluntary, many African Americans, both free and enslaved, were pressured into emigrating. Indeed, slaves were sometimes manumitted. That means they were given their freedom on condition that they leave the country immediately, right? According to historian Mark Leipson, colonization proved to be a giant failure, doing nothing to stem the forces that brought the nation to civil war. Between 1821 and 1847, only a few thousand African Americans out of the then millions in the U.S. emigrated to what would become Liberia. Many of them died from tropical diseases. In addition, the transportation of the immigrants to the African continent, including the provisioning of requisite tools and supplies, proved very expensive. Starting in the 1830s, the society was met with great hostility from white abolitionists, led by Gerrit Smith, who had supported the society financially, and William Lloyd Garrison, author of Thoughts on African Colonization, in which he proclaimed the society a fraud. According to Garrison and his many followers, the society was not a solution to the problem of American slavery. It actually was helping and was intended to help preserve it. And when we find out that there was actually fucking slavery in the colony that they were sending us to, right? Wrong Maryland, sorry. But yeah, this was the camp that Abraham Lincoln was in. Abraham Lincoln was not an abolitionist. Abraham Lincoln was part of the American Colonization Society. He believed that Negroes were inferior to white men. In fact, let me pull up a quote from Abraham Lincoln. Hang on. Sorry, y'all. I'm doing this on the fly, so. I'm trying to find a decent source here. Sheesh. I can't really find a good queen. Harper's Ferry? Yeah. Mischievous Raccoon, I would want them returned if it actually would preserve their culture, but the fact that blacks, by this time, black people had been in America for so long, because that was part of the work that colonization did, right? Was to literally destroy our culture.
We know the result.
That's why,
vote on the article
if you're a black person in America, if you're trying to trace your genealogy, you can only go back so far, because you were not thought of as a human being with your own customs and traditions and culture. You were fucking property. You were a lawn tool. You were cattle. That's where chattel slavery comes from.
Right? And that is the fact that the leader, the Republican leader in the House, the Republican leader in the Senate, both separating themselves from the president and being open Not in the case of
Yikes.
Kevin McCarthy. He says he's going to vote against impeachment, but pointing a finger directly at the president, saying he was responsible
So we'll check
for
back in
what
on
happened
that
at the
in 5
Capitol. He
minutes.
bears responsibility.
I'm trying really hard not to quote mine Abraham Lincoln here. So here we go. This is from history.com. In 1854, future President Abraham Lincoln agreed with this sentiment, talking about the American Colonization Society, when he gave a speech that mentioned colonization as an appealing solution to the moral evils of slavery, but noted its logistical and ethical challenges. So he knew it was fucked up, but he just didn't like black people that much. Yep, and it talks about the abolitionists that disagreed with colonization. So yeah. And this is from American Heritage, which screams right-wing rag to me. But the title of it is Better for Us to Be Separated. For some men, the only solution to the dilemma of blacks and whites together was for the blacks to go back where they came from. Right? If you wanted us to go back, then you shouldn't have fucking brought us here in the first place. But here we are. Read the Emancipation Proclamation. Yo, literally was like, I don't give a fuck if we abolish slavery. Yo, they didn't abolish slavery. Hold on. So slavery was not even abolished. It was reformed. That's why the people talking about how the police department needs to be reformed are fucking stupid. Because this is what reform looks like, right? 13th Amendment. Let's check it out. That's what abolished slavery, right? Let's read it. Let's go ahead and read this. Hang on. The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. Kind of makes you think about our current justice system, right? Why did I pause this?
And then Leader McConnell in the Senate saying he's open to the
calling for calm and saying that there should be no violence and saying that he doesn't stand for that and that these people, this attack.
I'll pull up the vid you sent, Mr.
Vision for America. They're also
yeah,
arguing
prison labor. This is why I can't fuck with Kamala Harris.
Hold
on, let me pull up a quote from Kamala
someone
Harris.
who was a senior official on the Trump campaign who was angry talking to me saying this is why he lost the election and also this is why this attack on the Capitol happened because President Trump could never get around to changing his tone, could never get around to dialing back, could never get around to condemning people who were on the fringes of his supporters and people who were extremists and in
Kamala
some ways,
Harris fought to keep nonviolent prisoners locked
the
up.
Capitol in his name. One of the things that
The reason why she fought to keep nonviolent prisoners locked up is because the state of California was generating so much money, so much revenue from prison labor.
Going down the line of lawyers who were sticking by the president, who defended him during the first impeachment. And so far, no one else has told me that they're willing to go into a Senate and to defend this president if a Senate trial is to take place.
It's your vice president
is very likely here with
girl power,
with the timing of that.
Girl boss, hashtag girl boss.
But most people here are saying to me, the president is really on his own here. And I should tell you, I talked to someone else, a former
if not
White
generating
House official who
saving,
said the president's political stock plummeted on Wednesday. He is not here. He's not here to really have a bunch of people around him who can say, well, maybe he'll have a lot of influence in the Republican Party. There is
involuntary firefighting. Prisoners are dealing with COVID bodies and stuff.
Who voted for him? But there are a lot of people who are saying this party needs to get rid of President Trump and start over. That's also why you're seeing some people look at Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy's statements a little bit with some cynical eye here, because it's in their benefit to do away with President Trump. He has now become someone who is radioactive for the Republican Party. So some of this is people thinking that Mitch McConnell and others were moved by what they saw at the Capitol. But some people think that this is them really just trying to hold on to the Republican Party and trying to save it from this possible sudden death when it comes to its association with President Trump and the events of Wednesday.
Well, at the very least, sending a signal that they don't want him to be part of the Republican Party going forward. But as we've been discussing for days and weeks now, Yamiche, the president did get, 75 million Americans voting for him. We know some of them have expressed disenchantment, disagreement because of what happened last week, but a lot of them are sticking with him. And it's a dilemma for Republicans in terms of how do they talk to these folks who voted for President Trump? How do they say, we're with you in terms of what we believe in, but hey, we don't want President Trump to have anything to do with the future of the party?
It's a good question, and it's a question that Republicans are really going to have to face in the post-Trump era. I spoke to someone just a few minutes ago who was accosted at an airport by someone because that person overheard this former senior advisor to the president talking about Vice President Pence, saying that he had done a good job, that he had stuck to the Constitution. That person overheard that conversation and then confronted the person
tilapia farming,
saying, "You're a traitor. You betrayed President Trump."
It's still going.
Mike
Stop the
Pence
count. That's
betrayed
funny.
President Trump, talking about, of course, the vice president. So, in the vice president is also in some ways
people call you
facing this
fat, but it's your
backlash.
genes.
That person told me,
You're Hispanic. Word. I don't understand what just happened.
We may have just lost the signal. I think we did lose a signal from Yamiche. Our apologies.
Look at that.
We'll
Look at how split that vote is. That's so
We've been
insane.
talking to Yamiche and before that to Lisa Desjardins at the Capitol as the House is voting on this article of impeachment. You were seeing the count just a moment ago. At the last time I looked, there were 7 Republicans who had joined every Democrat in voting to impeach. We have every reason to think this is an article that will, here you see the number, I think I can see this, 159 yes to 153 no. There's still over 120 members that haven't voted at this point. Again, only 7 Republicans
I still have that
joining
video
with Democrats,
open.
but we do expect there to
You
be
don't have to send it
at
again.
least a few more. So as we continue to wait for the vote and to see what the final count is on impeaching President Trump, joining us again, 2 Capitol Hill veterans, Victoria Nurse of Georgetown Law School.
I'll turn this down so we can watch this thing that Mischievous Raccoon sent.
I'm looking at the crowd here and the tens of thousands, probably 100,000 plus people here. And you did it all without burning down buildings? Without looting? I didn't know that that was possible. No shit. Boom. According to the media,
these explosions are bullshit.
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 Boom. When you have a large gathering of peaceful protesters, they're supposed to burn it all down.
Boom. These explosions are bullshit. Boom.
Who could have seen that coming?
Boom, boom, boom. These explosions are bullshit.
No shit.
Let's have a trial by combat.
This fight has only just begun.
Keep fighting.
Let justice be done.
I did it.
We're gonna walk down and I'll be there with you.
Get up.
The best is yet to come. When you catch somebody in the fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. It's so egregious, it's so bad, so base that people don't even believe it. It can't be true.
That's why my father sends a tweet. Patriots descend on Washington, D.C. Amen?
Damn, bars.
And a woman. No shit. Boom. According to the media,
these explosions are bullshit.
Bullshit.
Yo, thank you, outsiders.
When you have a large gathering of peaceful protesters, they're supposed to burn it all down.
Boom. These explosions are bullshit. Boom.
Who could have seen that coming?
Boom, boom, boom. These explosions are bullshit.
No shit.
Let's have a trial by combat. We're gathered together in the heart of our nation's capital to save our democracy.
What?
And Mike Pence is gonna have to come through for us. If he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country.
Who hides evidence?
Who?
Criminals hide evidence.
I had no idea. Who could have seen that coming?
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness.
Police
So
hide
let
evidence
every
too.
adversary against democracy,
Well, police are
against
criminals,
liberty,
so
be overturned right
I guess.
now.
So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue.
No shit.
Boom.
According to the media,
These explosions of bullshit.
Bullshit.
Bullshit. Boom.
When you have a large gathering of peaceful protesters, they're supposed to burn it all down.
Boom. These explosions of bullshit. Boom.
Who could have seen that coming?
Boom, boom, boom. These explosions of bullshit.
Oh shit.
Let's have trial by combat.
COVID-19. Oh shit. According to the media.
These explosions of bullshit.
Bullshit.
Bullshit. Boom.
When you have a large gathering of peaceful protesters, they're supposed to burn it all down.
Boom. These explosions of bullshit. Boom.
Who could have seen that coming?
Boom, boom, boom. These explosions of bullshit.
Oh shit.
Let's have trial by combat.
Shit, bars.
What the fuck, bro?
Yeah, that was funny.
Or at least the rules call for 2 hours, and it ended up being almost 3.5 hours.
It needs
Well,
more
what I
air
saw
horns for sure.
was fascinating. I think
Beer,
that,
beer, beer,
we
beer.
saw Steny Hoyer invoking the number 3 on the Republican side, quoting repetitively Ms. Cheney's statement that the president had done something that no other president had done, had betrayed the country in a way no other president had. He's quoting a Republican. And then we see, as
something
we were just discussing, that the Mr. McCarthy was talking about how the
go to
president
horny
was
jail,
responsible.
bonk.
So this seemed as if people were actually saying, yes, there's something really seriously wrong here. And what is wrong, everyone knows, and this didn't come up so much, but is about Donald Trump's willingness to say that this is a legitimate election. Because that's really what's
Absolutely
at
not
stake
horny enough.
here. We can recover from a small riot. It wasn't just a lot of people
Speaking
talk about
of
equivalencies,
being
and these were
horny,
false equivalencies of violence elsewhere.
I'm
in
gonna
the country.
step up and
But this
go
happened when
play some
the
jazz
Congress
for a
was
quick second.
attempting to
I'll be back in 30 seconds, so
certify
you're gonna get
the
a
presidential
nice
election,
peek at my
making
fat
it
donk,
legitimate.
my
And
flawless
that
demon
is
cake,
the background that
my
makes it
perfect
scary for
yokai
something
peach.
bigger called democracy. And
when I
believe
stand
that,
up, and then I'll be back in like 30 seconds. I'll be right back.
all of my former colleagues in the Senate or folks I have worked with over the years who are Republicans believe in our system of democratic governance. So it's not surprising, actually, that they understand the danger. Business understands the danger. If we don't have a peaceful transfer of power, we can't have a capitalist system. They don't care much. They give money to both parties because they want things to be stable, in essence. So I think it's a very interesting move for both parties to try, their leaders trying to, may not be consistent, but they're trying to build a narrative that the country can agree upon moving forward, because Donald Trump still engages in what the big lie is he won the election, he won it by a huge amount, and that could live on and fester. So one of the most important things about the impeachment, and I think this is what Mitch McConnell understands as well, is that it signals that that was false, that there was one winner, the winner was legitimate, and that we need to move on.
But there's still fuzziness in what a number of Republicans are saying.
You don't have to vote. You can just
saying that there's
vote
still,
present.
there are questions about how much fraud there was. Even those who say the president went too far.
Like, you don't
still
have to
hear
vote
Republicans
yay or nay.
saying,
You can just vote present.
And Michael Allen,
the-
I come
the
back
fence
to you on
walker
this. You still
position.
hear Republicans saying that, well, there are still questions about what happened, about whether this or that was legitimate. We need an investigation. In fact, they're calling, as you know, for an investigation into what happened at the Capitol last week when they're already, I mean, there clearly are going to be, there are legal investigations.
Yeah, I'm pretty
underway by
sure
the
they're
Department
going
of
to
Justice
agree
and
to this resolution.
The legal system, people are going to be held legally accountable. But
It's
there
crazy
is a
that this vote is so
reluctance,
close, though.
to
Like, it's insanely
demand
crazy
that
to
the
me.
president say the election is over.
I know that's like redundant.
The
but
election is
whatever.
over. He is not saying
I'm
that.
a streamer, not a fucking
He is not saying
Mensa
that,
candidate.
and that is what a lot of people are looking for
I'm dumb.
members of Congress to
That's why I'm
stand
on
up
Twitch.
and say. They are looking
and
for them
YouTube
to
and
show
Facebook.
some honesty. I thought I heard a little bit of that today, and that
Aaron Thompson,
I
thank
heard
you for the
Elise
follow. I
Stefanik,
appreciate
I heard
the
other
support.
members of Congress from the Republican side say, "Hey, listen, you know what? I just had a constitutional issue with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they maybe have cited one or two other things, but I didn't hear a lot of Dominion voting machines and all the really
Thanks
weird
for the like.
crackpot conspiracy
Yes,
theories
it's
that have
B
been
more. Hey,
put
Aaron
out there.
Thompson. Hey.
But the point still stands. It's an uncomfortable number of people still raising that particular issue. That is the heart of the
Himbo,
matter.
yes.
That is what the president
Very
should
strong Himbo
renounce.
vibes here.
And that's
Very strong
for the
Thembo
very
and
reason
Himbo
that
vibes
that's
here.
been so key to what he's done since the election. That's the very reason he's not going to do that. I saw him put out a statement during the debate. It didn't look like a typical Trump
This dude
statement
definitely
by
looks like
any
Better
means.
Call
Someone
Saul.
else
He needs to
clearly
fix
wrote
his
it
wig.
that called for
He
no
definitely should have
violence, as
fixed
new
his
people
wig
approach
before he got on
Washington
national
for the
television looking like that, because he
inauguration.
looks a
But it
mess.
didn't exactly ring true.
He looks a
and it
fucking
didn't get
mess.
to the heart of the matter, which is the issues around the actual conduct of the election, for which I'm afraid to say, as everybody.
That's what's up,
from
Aaron Thompson.
Some Republicans, even on Fox News, have said, "Where's the evidence?"
Is there
of voter
Beijing
fraud?
for
Where are
white
the
people
evidence of
other than that
dead
dude,
people
that
voting?
wild ass dude in
And
the
where
UK?
the
That was
evidence of people
wild.
voting twice. We don't see it.
Michael Allen, thank you. I'm sorry I haven't been able to hear everything you've been
Had
saying. I'm hearing
Beijing
many
all
other
on his
voices
face
in
with
my
the
ear
fake
at the same
beard?
time
Come
you're
on now.
talking,
You can't
so
do
I
all
wasn't
that.
able to catch everything you're saying. I do want you to stand by, though. We're going to come back to you. But right now, I want to bring in former Florida Republican Congressman Bill McCollum, who served as one of the House managers for President Bill Clinton's impeachment trial, and Frank Bowman. He is a law professor at the University of Missouri. He's also author of the book High Crimes and Misdemeanors, A History of Impeachment for the Age of Trump. I am still hearing one of my colleagues in my ear, so I'm hoping I'm going to be able to have a conversation with you that I can hear. Congressman McCollum, good
Damn,
to see
that was
you.
shade.
What are you hearing today?
That was shade.
From
That was
your
a sub.
former
That was a
Republican
sub at her
colleague who
coworker to say,
served in
"Shut the
House
fuck up. I'm trying to do business
for
with these
a number
interviews."
of years.
That was
What
a
do you
sub.
hear in what they're saying in terms of the president's responsibility for what happened last week, and yet most of them being against impeachment?
Judy, it's good to be with you. What I'm hearing today, and I believe it's true, is that there is a great concern in a large number of Republicans throughout the country that the Congress,
That dude Frank
by and
Bowman.
large,
What's up with Frank Bowman?
that there's a double standard. That in fact, yes,
Let's
the
take a
president
peek at
may
Frank
have gone
Bowman.
way too far here in what he said to the crowd the day they came up and tore up the Capitol and clearly did things that they should be punished for.
Okay.
And yes, maybe there is a truth that this is
Yo, what
something
up,
more impeachable,
Hollybox?
potentially than and convictable than what he was charged with previously.
I'm gonna just throw this up one
This
more
sense
time,
that
one time
the
for the one time.
public, the Republicans base not just Trump supporters, but
You know what the
Republicans
fuck it is?
generally
It's Baltimore.
feel
Right,
that
shout out to
Democrats have
Kalasab.
gotten away with similar types of things.
It's a
Maybe
cool
it didn't
T-shirt,
happen
'cause
in the
look.
Capitol, but violence, the things that went on in the city this summer, statements that were made that were inflammatory by even the vice
It's green,
president.
so it's invisible in the middle. But shout
that I
out
think are gonna
Kalasab.
resonate
It's
for a long
Baltimore.
time
You know
to
what the
come.
fuck it is.
As far as whether or not he is impeached, I think from day one they believed that it would happen, just because of what the situation was and the crimes of the people that were there. That
I was
committed
raised in
it.
Baltimore
The fact the
County,
president
lived in
said,
Baltimore
"Go up
City
there,
for
however
5
peacefully
years.
It was. That
Back
he
in the
was
county
reckless in
now.
that. I don't know if it was amounting to inciting an insurrection. That's the sort of thinking that's going on right now. And we
Originally
haven't
from
had
Dayton,
hearings.
Ohio.
We haven't had a chance for the president to rebut this, although in the previous impeachment process he didn't get that chance till the trial itself, and that's perhaps not unusual. But in the impeachment of President Clinton, they did give, as you know, a chance for the president to say something before in a hearing before they went to the floor. So it isn't just process; it's precedent. It's concern that there is a double standard.
Yeah, they're gonna agree
It's
to this
genuine
resolution,
concern
looks
on the
like.
part of quite a number of them. that
Watch
you
me on the
really
big
have
big screen. I
incited
made it. Oh
insurrection.
shit, I'm on the
Those
big
are pretty
screen.
strong words. And I personally
Am I
doubt
big
that
on the big
president
screen?
intended to overthrow the government or to have his people that were there go in and disrupt what was going on inside the Capitol. However, he was reckless. in
Right on, Aaron
what he said.
Thompson.
I think
Salute,
that's
salute. I lived in. I
If
grew
you
up
ask
in
him
Relay.
privately,
Near, if
almost
you don't know where
all
Relay
say
is,
that.
it's near Arbutus.
And
If you don't know
Keeler
where
would know
Arbutus
that
is, it's
himself.
near
It was
Catonsville.
not
I'm sure
smart
everyone
to
knows where
say that he
Catonsville
did,
is.
whether he intended for them to do that or not.
Then
Again,
I
it's only a small number. You also
lived
have another factor.
in Windsor
There were
Mill,
tens of thousands
which is
of
near
people in Washington
Randallstown.
that day at that rally, And
for a
only
hot
few
minute,
hundred
lived
at
in
best
Catonsville,
were the ones that were
actual
radical.
Catonsville for
And
a
you
hot
could say
minute.
the same thing if you were a Democrat when you're looking at some of these riots in
Moved
the
to
cities
actual
this summer.
Randallstown for
But
a
we've
hot
got
minute.
bigger problems, and going forward and having
Then
the
I lived
trial,
in Remington
impeachment is a foregone conclusion, whether they vote
for
it or
a
not,
super hot
Republicans.
minute.
But having the trial is probably not smart.
Moved
And from
back
day
to
one, I've said if I
Randallstown, and
were
then from
President like
Randallstown
Biden, I
I
would want it
moved to
passed as
Waverly.
let the
And
impeachment
I was living
occur,
in Waverly for a
and then
minute, and then I
not
lived in
have the
better
trial.
Waverly for a minute,
It's
and now
just going
I'm
to continue
in
to fester the
where I'm
problems
at
in this
now.
country when we need
Undisclosed
to be focusing
location.
on what's really wrong. So I am worried about what happens as we go
You worked in
forward this
Catonsville,
spring.
but I worked in
And I
Catonsville
think most
too,
of these
under the
Republicans
table.
are too, not so much just inside their party, but between the two parties and between in our system of government. It is going to be a very strenuous and strained year, I believe.
Bill McCollum, former
I would have
congressman
much
from the
preferred
state
to
of
have lived in one
Florida,
place my
Republican.
whole
Looking at the
life,
number of
mischievous
Republicans who've
raccoon.
now joined Democrats in favoring impeachment. I think I
moved
see
around so
18.
much as a
It's
consequence
small number on the
of
screen that I'm
my
looking at. Can
class.
somebody tell me, is 18 accurate?
I am
It's
working
10.
class
I
poor.
apologize. I thought I
My
saw
mom
10,
and I
then
have had to move around a
the
lot
zero got squiggly.
over the
I
course
thought
of
it
the
was-
last decade
let's be
after
accurate.
losing
10
the house that I
Republicans
grew
at
up
this
in.
hour have
So, yeah.
decided to join Democrats in voting to impeach
My logo,
President Trump.
it's
We still have,
shout out
it
to
looks like
Human
7
Roadkill. He
Republicans
hand drew that
who
for
have
me.
not voted yet.
It's basically
But
like a
that's
death
where the
metal
tally
logo.
stands, and
I
we are
just
getting
kind of
close to the
splashed that
end
across the
of this
Baltimore
vote count.
flag
Well, let me
right
turn
there.
to you,
You know what I
Frank
mean?
Bowman. You
That's,
heard, I
that's
think,
kinda
what
just how I
Bill
did that.
McCollum said
That's how I felt like
about
doing that.
the Republican arguments. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I'll be candid.
I would have
think the notion
been
of
a-okay with
trying
living in
to,
Relay for 30 years.
argue that
honestly.
there's some
It wouldn't have been
equivalence
30 years. It would have
between,
been about 25 years.
ill-advised, perhaps.
And let me interrupt
by
you,
some.
Frank Bowman. I'm going to interrupt you.
Yo,
My apology.
Deeren,
I
thanks
should
for the
have
like.
said we've now passed 218, which means President Donald Trump is impeached by the House
Yeah,
of
Relay is very
Representatives for a
nice. I
second
still go
time.
back
This
there
is the
sometimes
first
to
time
take
in the
pictures
history
at
of the United States
the
that a
Avalon Trail.
president has been
The
impeached
state park is just
twice.
forever.
So, Frank Bowman, I'm going to
I'm
come
sure
back
you
to
feel
you
the same
to
way
ask you
about that place
the
I
question
do,
that I did,
Twan.
but
That's
also
like,
as someone who's a scholar of impeachment.
it pisses me off really fucking bad, like
Well,
really
to
fucking
resume
bad.
the
whenever I go to the
thought,
state
I
park,
do
whenever
think
I hit the
it's
Avalon Trail and I
unfortunate
see
that anyone is arguing that
litter and
there's
shit
any
like
significant
that,
equivalence
fucking people
between,
leaving their coolers and beer cans and
ill-advised
shit all over the
statements,
fucking
perhaps by
ground.
some,
If I catch you doing that shit,
Democrats
I'll beat the fuck
over
out
a
of you.
period
Just
of
know off
time
top.
during the past year
On Grand
and,
Theft Auto.
And what we're
I'll
here to
find
talk
out where
about
you
today.
spawn at and come beat you
And
up, and I'll come spawn
part of the
camp you.
problem here is has to do with the structure of the article of impeachment. The Democrats chose to focus as a criminal lawyer you might call the charging paragraph, on this incitement to insurrection.
Yo, Twan.
Well, I don't say that that's wrong.
I remember one of the first times I headed out with
It
like
allows people to argue
Grim and Jordan and
about the
them, and they
president's
told me that there was
specific
coyotes
intention
out
to
there, and I didn't
cause
believe them.
actions on the
And
part of his
we
supporters.
crossed we
It
actually walked
focuses,
across the Thomas
the
Viaduct,
attention
and
of
we were
everyone
over
very
at that lot
narrowly on
behind
what was
the
certainly,
biker bar,
the tragic
just fucking
and-
around. And I remember
and
looking at the
violent
coyote tracks, being like,
conclusion
"Damn, yo, them fox tracks
of the
look kind
real
of big."
reason that he needs to be impeached, which is that this
And that's
was
when
merely
I
the
realized
violent
that we got
conclusion
coyotes
of a
out there. I was
2-month
like,
long,
fucking like 14.
consistent attempt to overturn the results of a democratic election. It didn't just happen on the 6th.
Yeah, hell.
Right.
From the beginning, Mr. Trump sought to create a narrative of falsity,
That
in the
was
election,
hell.
of fraud in the election. He
Because if
tried
them
to
bikers
pressure
would have fucking found
state
me back
officials.
there, I probably would
He
have gotten
tried to
lynched.
convince and pressure the vice president of the United States to do something that he has no constitutional
It used to
power
piss me
do.
off that people used to throw
And
pits parties
regardless of
too.
whether or
I
not
didn't
there
fuck with
had been
people leaving their
violence at the
beer
Capitol
cans and
on
shit
the
at the
6th.
pits.
He would be equally
I used
impeachable
to
in my
high
view,
key. I used to
because
lean
he
on
sent
people
that
like,
mob of
"Yo,
people
pick
down
your
there
little shit
to
up,
do
yo.
what?
Don't leave no fucking trash
He
in my
sent them
neighborhood."
down there to pressure
Fucking
Congress
dumbass.
into to
All those kids would go to the fucking
invalidating
obelisk next to the
the
Thomas
valid
Viaduct and get
results
drunk
of
and
a
leave their
legal
little beer
election.
cans and shit and tag
And
the fucking
whether or
obelisk
not
up and
he
shit.
intended them to come in and
I
kill
promise you,
people,
don't let me catch
he
you
did
doing that
intend
shit. I swear to
for
God.
them to go down
Don't let me
and
catch you
pressure
doing that shit, because I'll
Congress
find you on Grand
into-
Theft Auto.
into
I'll
literally
spawn camp
stealing
outside of your
an election.
condo,
He
and I'll
did
fucking beat the
intend
fuck
for them
out of you
to
every time
pressure
you come
Congress
outside.
into
So
making
you have
him
to switch
quite
servers.
literally an unelected autocrat. That's the core
And
of the impeachable offense here.
Exactly, and that's the question is, you know, what did the president do in his 2 months of stating repeatedly that the election was stolen, that there was massive fraud, that he had actually won in a landslide? Congressman Bill
Donald
McCollum,
Trump, two-time consecutive impeachment champ.
That sort of drumbeat, if you will, of day after day, of saying it, of going
Hell
out
yeah,
on the
Twan. I didn't know there was a
trail,
Poke Gem on there.
talking in
Are you
public
Team
about it,
Valor? Because I remember
calling
when
the
Pokemon
Georgia
Go first
Secretary of
came
State
out,
to get them to find
I was still working
11,000
at Pizza
votes.
786, and I used to just
This was not
cruise
just
through
a
Arbutus,
casual,
taking all them
"Gee, I
fucking
hope,
gems. Oh, you're Mystic?
you know,
Nah,
things
fuck out
work
of here.
out for me." It was.
I used to
was
just
an
cruise through.
active
I took
pressure to
the
get
post office gym.
people to
I took
change
the
the
Halethorpe
result
Elementary
in a
gym. I
number
took
of
the
states.
train station gym. Took the
Culminating,
Hollywood movie theater
as
gym.
Professor Bowman just said, in
I
encouraging
was
his
just
vice
I ran
president to
all
do
through
something he
Arbutus when
couldn't do, and then
Pokemon Go first came
criticizing
out. I had to
Vice
level like
President
fucking
Pence
1500s
when he couldn't, saying he was
Jolteon.
weak.
I was not
So,
playing. I was
Congressman
not playing on
McCollum,
that
I
game.
guess,
Matter of
you know,
fact,
we come back
I might
to
download Pokemon. I
whether
might
it
start
should
playing
have been
Pokemon Go
incitement
again because
to
I stopped
insurrection
playing
or not,
Pokemon Shield.
But it very clearly, it wasn't just what happened on January the 6th, it was what happened since Election Day.
Well, look, Judy, I don't think there's any question that if there were incitement to insurrection, that's impeachable. That the issue there is, as was stated, a question of whether that's true or not, whether that was his intent. With respect to the other question on pressuring people, no,
Yeah,
I don't.
I was
I'm
going through
uncomfortable with
Arbutus
the
for
fact that
Valor.
Pence was pressured. I'm uncomfortable and don't like the fact that the president, over a number of months and years now that he's been president, has turned on some of his people irrationally, in my opinion. That doesn't mean I disagree with his policies. I think he had a very good policies, and unfortunately, his legacy will be remembered for things like this. And yet, at the same time, if you think about it for a minute, anybody who's left office has the right, or has gone
So
through an election,
yeah,
has the right to
they're
contest
going to
it.
be
The
passing this
question you're concerned
resolution.
with, and I keep hearing
Doesn't
people
even
say,
matter how the rest of
is
these
the
votes
pressure
go.
he put on people, like calling up the Secretary of State. That was potentially borderline a problem, no question about it. I have to chair an organization that has the Secretary of State's Association on the Republican side under it. And so I think these are honorable people. But there were things going on in the elections in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Wisconsin, Michigan, and perhaps in Arizona and Nevada that we need to have investigations about. In fact, we still need to have those. And I'm hoping the state legislatures do that. I'm hoping that it would probably hope against hope that Congress would do it. But that would go a long way to alleviating all of the concerns and the fears that many Republicans today have that indeed ballots were stolen. I'm not completely sure that anybody on our side of the aisle believes it's just because Trump exaggerates these things that nothing happened. I think they don't believe, most of them, I don't really think that anybody but President-elect Biden won at the end of the day. But there's something wrong with what happened leading up to the election, the changes of those laws. The Supreme Court didn't choose to take them up. They said they didn't have the evidence in some case or whatever the excuse was. But it doesn't mean that nothing happened that was wrong or that things shouldn't be corrected out there. And we need to have hearings, public inquiries in order to establish yes or no. Let me give you one illustration. There is a thing going on the internet. I'm going to say this to you before you go there. Thing going around the internet that shows that at a given time,
What's up, Gamer
in the
Jim?
presidential election and in the most recent one between the Purdue and Ossoff.
I agree with you, Gamer
If
J.
you took a picture on your TV screen, you'd have seen
I
like
think
for the
this
Ossoff
coming
campaign,
weekend leading up to
300-something
J20 is
thousand
going to
votes, and
be
for the campaign of Purdue, 270,000
hectic.
votes. And then instantaneously,
They've already got the
some
National Guard
1,000
straight
votes
up
disappear
sleeping, like
off of
chilling
their-
out
deducted
at the Capitol.
from the campaign for Purdue. The same thing happened in the middle of the night in watching national television screens.
I don't
with
think,
significant
Boom King,
numbers
I don't
with
think
regard to
you
Trump.
have
now,
met
nobody's
Fade Runner
explained
before.
that to the public. That may have been perfectly
I've gone to school with both
legitimate
of you.
change,
We
but it's
both,
very
we,
strict.
I've gone to
There are
high school
people
with
who say
both
you
of you,
can't
but
take
we went
money.
to two different high schools.
So nobody's aired that. Nobody's talked about that. Nobody's discussed it.
Well, my
That's-
understanding, though, if I could just interrupt, my understanding is, though, that Georgia election officials, both Secretary of State Raffensperger and Mr. Sterling, who is the
That's
top
cool,
elections
Twan.
official under him, say they have looked at every single
Yeah,
challenge,
there was
every single question, including the one
the
you just
school
raised,
that was next to
and
my
they
house that I lived in
answered it to their
Better
satisfaction,
Waverly
there
was
nothing
mad funny
wrong,
because
that
it was me
something
with like my
with
OP
a very,
Pokemon,
clear
and I would just go to
explanation.
this like
But we don't
elementary
have time
school
to go
with these
back over
kids that I
all of it
know
right now,
like
but I just want to
only had
I just want to say
Pokemon when
that
their parents were
these
letting them have phone
allegations
time or
continue
whatever,
to
and
hang
they
out
probably
there,
weren't even
and they
supposed to
will
be on the
continue
phone at school.
to, as
And
long
it'd be
as the
mad
president
funny.
says,
They would spend like
that
5
he
days
doesn't
beating
accept
my
the result
Pokemon,
of the
right?
election.
And right when they
I'm gonna-
finally beat my Pokemon, I would
we
just
have
bury
literally
them all and put them right back on
just a
there.
few seconds.
That
Go
gym
ahead.
stayed red,
Just
my
don't you
guy.
think we would be
That
helpful
gym
to the
fucking
country
stayed
if you
red.
have
I
a
know
hearing
those
and
kids
air
were
that? Would the
heated.
Secretary of State
I
come
know those kids were
testify
mad as
to
shit.
that effect? I mean, most people haven't heard him say that. Most people haven't seen the evidence, so to speak. And all I'm suggesting isn't that they're correct or that any of these conspiracy ideas are correct. I'm just saying we need, as a nation, to bind our wounds here, to have some open discussion about this and have public generally have an opportunity to hear questions going on between representatives in Congress or their legislators or somebody of these officials, and not just rely on the speechifying and the reporting that's going on right now. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
I got a
as
minute
you know, it is
respond to that?
Republican officials in Georgia.
Yeah,
who've
it's
been
if you
standing
don't have
by
a lot
those
of
results.
gyms and stuff
Yes,
in your
Frank
town,
Bowman,
it's
go
very
ahead.
hard to play.
I have to confess, with the greatest respect to Congressman McCollum, I'm absolutely shocked to hear him at this late date to continue to raise this narrative, which is totally false, that there is the slightest
Oh
question
yeah, but they have to send the
about
National
the
Guard
integrity
there.
of
The
any
crazy
of these
thing is,
elections.
they've already talked about how they aren't
If there were
planning
the
on shooting
slightest
anyone or
question
doing
about the
anything like
integrity
that.
of any of them, that
And
could be
Fade Runner and I
proven
were
to the
talking about how
slightest
silly
degree.
that is, because
It
they're
would have been
definitely
brought
planning on
forward
shooting you,
in the
friends.
some 60 lawsuits that
You
were
might
brought
want to
by Mr.
consider
Trump.
what your opposition's
And I'm just,
plans are, because
this is the heart of the
I know you
problem
think it's
that
your
confronts us
people
right
and
now.
that you're
This narrative of election
all going to
falsity
be peacefully
was
escorting each other out of the
raised by Mr.
Capitol just
Trump,
like last week.
promulgated and promoted by not just Mr. Trump, but
might
other
have some nutters
institutional
on your
Republicans. And Mr. McCollum seems determined to persist
There was people
in that.
quoted last week in
This
the middle of all
language
that talking about
there
how
are
they're going to
questions
come
and we
back
should
armed or whatever.
resolve
So
them, does
it is
nothing
what it
more
is.
than
Maybe they're banking on the fact that
create
they'll
the
be total
enduring
cowards and
suspicion
see the National Guard there and
on the
change
part
their
of
minds
millions
before
of
they even
Americans
go
that
out there.
something was wrong in
Who
this
knows?
election. And it is time for Republicans to stop, because they, just as much as Donald Trump, are responsible for the constitutional crisis in which we find ourselves. Because the constitutional crisis in which we find ourselves and the ground upon which Mr. Trump is actually being impeached, it is because he tried to reverse the results of a legitimate, lawfully contested election. And he was aided and abetted in that for the last 2 months by people for whom it was in their political advantage. And if you look at the board up there today,
go ahead.
that is the result. Because Republicans, many of them, refuse to abandon that narrative.
Well, the millions of Americans,
Yes,
millions,
and that is the.
that's why we need the hearings. Not because I think that, but because they do. And that's not because Republican office holders are espousing that, other than Trump, but it's because they do believe that. And there's been no opportunity to vet it
Shout out to Bug Pals.
a way that would resolve that issue for them. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, what I would say is that there have been plenty of opportunities. Let's listen to Speaker Nancy
nays
Pelosi.
Are 197. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Congratulations. That's it. What now?
I'm sorry if we cut off the ayes, but the ayes have it. The article of impeachment against President Trump has passed the House of Representatives with, I believe, 10 Republicans joining Democrats, making it a bipartisan acceptance of the idea that this president should be impeached for his role in inciting an insurrection, in leading the actions that led to the mob sieging the U.S. Capitol a week ago today. We heard there's some business still going on, laying a motion on the table to reconsider, but for all intents and purposes, the vote on the article of impeachment has now passed. So this is the first president in history in the United States to be impeached twice. Let's go back to our to our two other analysts who've been with us, Victoria Nurse and Michael Allen. Victoria, you've been listening to some of what Congressman McCollum was saying in the discussion back and forth about these allegations that hang out there, despite the fact that they've been investigated, they've gone to court scores and scores of times, and they've been knocked down, but they still live as President Trump continues to push them.
If he actually gets impeached and is found guilty, because impeachment is just a trial,
lawyers are now
it doesn't
trying
actually
to
mean anything in and of
disbar
itself.
various of the
But if he
people
is
who have brought the
impeached and
suits,
convicted, that means he
because
cannot
there was
run
no
again
evidence.
in 2024.
And
He
presumably
doesn't
if
get
there
his
were
pension.
evidence,
He
they
doesn't
would've,
get any of the benefits
brought
that
it
would
to the various courts that heard the challenges.
a person who
So from a
held public
legal
office.
perspective,
It means he
it
gets
seems
El
that this
Zilcho.
is,
He
you know,
gets
maybe
kicked
from
out
a
of
public
office and he
relations
gets El Zilcho
perspective,
and he can't run again.
it would be
is
a
what it
wise
means,
idea
basically.
to, you know, think this. But I think that it's really not fair at this point to undermine in any way what we now know, and it should be viewed as strange that we still have to keep unearthing these results, because those were the arguments of
Yeah,
Ted
and it
Cruz,
removes the
by
Secret
way,
Service from him.
when
That's
he said, I'm
part
going to
of,
challenge
part
these
of it, for sure.
electors because I think we need more time for an audit.
Yep, no travel budget. He gets
But why do
absolutely
you need
nothing
an
from the
audit
public
if
coffer
you've had
anymore.
60 lawsuits, and
That's what
many
it
of
means.
them
And
actually
on
were
top of the fact that he won't
decided
be
by
able to run in
Trump
2024.
judges. One of the first ones by Judge Bibas in the Third Circuit, appointed by Trump. So I think Democrats' response to this is, no, this is just, Professor Bowman was saying, you know, this is just more of the same. And the problem is that we can only get to healing if responsible people of the parties stop making these baseless attacks. And I don't know where to go to here. One of the good things that I heard today was that only some people were making what I consider to be poor legal arguments. There was a fair amount of arguments about the First Amendment. There were a fair amount of arguments about so-called due process. And legally, these both have issues surrounding them. But when we got to the leader speeches, Mr. Hoyer and Mr. McCarthy, we saw that they didn't really rest on those. These were sort of off on the side, which is what they should be, because this is really about democracy. You know, I always tell people when they ask, oh, is it a crime? Well, no, you don't need a crime for impeachment. But by the way, a crime is a really low bar.
Right.
In other words, there's lots of things you can do, like fail to pay your parking tickets, and you would never impeach on that, right? So it's kind of a low bar to say that, particularly when the assault here is on the democratic process. It's a constitutional charge. I don't think people should focus too much on the incitement. I tweeted out over the weekend that focusing on that
if this
word was
goes
a very
through,
bad
he
idea.
will be barred from running in
If you look at the substance of
2024.
the articles, you'll see that they focus on the election.
And we'll see how the
and attempt to
populace, we'll see
overturn
how
the
his base
election.
reacts to that.
And that is what we say in the law is the
Probably not gonna be
gravamen of
good.
the complaint. It's a constitutional offense against democracy. The other thing people, kept saying that I think your viewers should understand.
What's up,
about the
Spirit
First
Mayo?
Amendment
Yeah,
is that,
you literally
you can't
just
be
missed the
put in
vote, but
jail
they
for
voted
speech.
to pass the resolution to
but it wasn't a speech
impeach
that
Donald
anyone's
Trump.
trying to impeach.
So he's the first president in
happened, what
history,
his conduct
and so
was,
far
and we
the only
noticed
president in
this
the history,
by several of the speakers.
because
they
it
highlighted
only
the
just
fact
happened like
that
30 minutes ago.
It was
but
not only the speech.
he's the only president
it
in
was
history
what
right
happened
now to
when
be
the rioters
impeached
were
twice.
in the Capitol, the vice president was trying to reach him, and he did nothing. The
And
president
we'll see
got on
if
television and said,
we
please say something to stop
prosecute
this. And if
him
you have
as a
duty
result of the impeachment.
under the Constitution to protect
The fact
it,
that
and you
the
do
resolution
nothing,
to impeach him only passed by like
is a
20 or
very
30
serious
votes is
problem.
kind of alarming to me, honestly. But
That and
we'll
as-
see what
as
happens
has
in the
been
impeachment
discussed,
hearings.
Victoria Nurse, the repeated statements the president made in the days and weeks leading up to the rally on the Mall that day, in which he said the election had been stolen from him, and riled up his supporters to do something about it. Finally, I want to come back to you, Michael Allen. For Republicans, where do Republicans go?
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
here?
He doesn't have diplomatic immunity or anything
only
like that.
A loss of what,
This
10
man
votes,
is back with
to
that
join the
awful
Democrats,
hairpiece.
but clearly a party troubled by what their president has done.
Very much so. I would say more than today's vote, what Republicans are more upset
He needs to
about
just go ahead and rock a
is last
baldy,
week's vote.
because
And after the
he looks a
violence,
mess with that
as
wig
many
on.
as
He looks a fucking
121
mess.
to 131, depending on which votes you look at, went back into the Capitol and still voted in
Obama funded ISIS?
decertify
Jesus
the electoral
Christ, dude.
votes
What was his
for
name on
states
Parler?
after all of the violence. That, I think, is what has had people upset since last week. Maybe some of them could have cured themselves today with an impeachment yes vote.
No,
That
Mike
was
Pence is not the
unlikely to
president now.
happen,
So how impeachment works
given
is
where
impeachment
those
itself
individuals are
doesn't
on the
actually mean
spectrum.
anything. It
I
just
think
means they're
it's
going to hear
nearly a
out.
civil war
It's basically like
within the
going to
Republican
court,
Party,
right?
not
If you
one
get
of
charged with a
violence,
crime,
not
it
one
doesn't mean
in
you're going to
1861,
jail. It just
but
means that
one
they're
where
going to
we
hear your
debate the
defense
role
and
of President
deliberate
Trump
and
in
so
the
on and so
Republican
forth.
Party going
So
forward.
now there
I
needs to be
think most
impeachment
people
hearings,
understand
and
the Republican Party has changed
if he's
forever.
found guilty and
It's not
convicted,
just
then he
that
will
we
be
are going to
removed
be
from
more
office.
populist and more geared towards blue collar Americans. I think there's a little bit of a swagger and an attitude that Republican voters want to see in taking on the elite and taking on
Yeah, Saul
Washington.
Goodman, straight up.
I think that is what you're going to see going forward. Who can inherit the mantle of the new Republican Party, but without all the considerable negatives of President Trump, ones that were on display long before Election Day, but in particular after Election Day, where I think it has become very, very clear to even some MAGA folks that I know that the president
He has
did
one
not
triangle.
comport
At least
himself
our
well,
boy Junkrat has
not
two
only on the
triangles.
way
He's only got
last
one
Wednesday,
triangle.
but certainly last Wednesday and beyond.
My man's hairline is fucked up.
Michael Allen, Victoria Nurse, thank you both. And before you,
Yeah, he's the
Bowman,
first and
Bill
only
McCollum,
president
thank
so
you
far
all
to
for
be
joining us to
impeached
provide
twice.
analysis on this historic day, second impeachment of President Trump. Finally, I want to go back to our own Lisa Desjardins at the Capitol, watching all of this from the beginning. Lisa, what can you say after watching this and thinking about where this Congress goes from here?
First, Judy, I think many of us in this building are remembering where we were this exact hour a week ago. This is the hour when Capitol Police were clearing this same building, the hallway that I'm standing next to, of rioters. So
Triangle,
1 week later, in the same hour,
triangle,
to have impeachment pass the House
triangle.
chamber is something I don't think we would have thought of then, and just adds to the historic moment that we're going to be processing for a long time. I want to also say that we now know 10 Republicans voted, as you've been reporting, yes for impeachment, and we know who those 10 Republicans are. Some of them have announced this vote previously. Liz Cheney of Wyoming, Tony Gonzalez, the pro football player of Ohio, Jamie Brown Butler of Washington, John Katko, New York, Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, Peter Meyer, a freshman from Michigan, Dan Newhouse of
How do I
Washington
think Trump is
State,
doing
who
right
made
now?
his
I wish he could
announcement on the
tweet. I
floor.
wish I could read
Tom
his
Rice
tweets.
of the Grand Strand in South Carolina, Fred Upton of Michigan, and
Ted
David
Cruz got to be
Valadao,
out
one
too.
of the
We'll see what
ones
they
that we
do with
hadn't
all
known
these senators
before
and such
today
that
of California.
enabled this
Those
shit.
are the 10
I don't think anything's
Republicans
going to
voting
happen
yes.
to him, honestly.
As I reported earlier, the majority leader, Steny Hoyer, for the Democrats in the House, had thought they would see 10 to 20 votes from Republicans, and they just had that bottom layer. Some representatives who have been watching, like Ann Wagner of Missouri, have put out statements as to why they said no. I spoke to her before the vote. I know that she was not sure how she was going to vote. In the end, in her statement, Judy, Wagner wrote that she felt that a fuller investigation needed to be conducted before this impeachment vote. And while she wasn't ruling out that the president committed some kind of impeachable act, what she was saying is that she didn't think she had enough information yet. You know, we'll see how her constituents judge that.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that is a
Antifa
statement we
impeached
probably
him,
will
for
see
sure.
from some of these
Antifa
moderate Republicans or Republicans
put the MAGA
in
hats on and
districts
did
that
all
have
that
been in
shit
play
last
in the
week.
past who chose to vote no. But as we've said, Judy, these Republicans have faced very real political and personal threats over this vote.
No question, a lot of pressure on them, even if the leadership of their party was not officially
I want to
lobbying
see
them. No
what
question
some
the
of these.
pressure
What
had
did
to be
Matt Gaetz have to
enormous on
say?
them
Is Matt
politically.
Gaetz
I
allowed to
think
tweet
about
right
what
now?
the consequences would be for them, and perhaps even around their personal safety.
That's right.
Lisa Desjardins, thank you. What a day for you after what you went through there inside the Capitol, as you said a week ago today, when it was overrun by hundreds and hundreds of insurrectionist people who were there to overturn the vote count for Joe Biden.
What did Liz Cheney say? Did she vote
Lisa
no?
Desjardins,
Or vote
thank
for
you.
impeachment?
We'll see you on the NewsHour shortly. That does wrap up our PBS NewsHour special coverage of the second impeachment of President Donald Trump. We hope you will join us tonight on the NewsHour on your PBS station or online at pbs.org/NewsHour. For now, I'm Judy Woodruff.
So Liz
Thank you
Cheney
so
voted
much,
for impeachment,
and
and
we'll
I
see you
guess
soon.
Dan Crenshaw's goofy ass is
This program was made possible
supporting
by
her.
the Corporation for Public
And
Broadcasting
Matt Gaetz
and by
is
contributions to
coming
your
at his neck
PBS station
because
from viewers
Matt
like
Gaetz
you.
is
Thank you.
fucking insane. Jesus Christ, dude. How is Matt Gaetz still allowed to tweet, dude? Like, look at this fucking level of lunacy. This is funny, though.
You're watching PBS.
That's funny. What's happening now? Peace out, Spirit Mayo. Thanks for stopping by. There's no National Guardsman in there, but... I will say this though, them storming the Capitol or whatever was goofy, but there was pretty based events where they were talking about. I heard someone say they were fucking just straight sparking up fat doobies in the fucking Oregon room or whatever. Hell yeah, yo, burn one down in the state capitol. Like, that's fucking tough, yo. That's fucking tough. I can't deny that. All right. So that's that on that, I guess. That was pretty insane. I can't believe I survived that. There was a few points where I could feel my brain cells committing suicide, but we made it. It's cool. Here we are. We lived. We lived. Donald Trump was or rather, the House has passed the resolution to impeach Donald Trump, so Donald Trump will be impeached again for the second time. For the first time in history, he will be the president that is impeached twice in one term, no less. And it's troublesome to me that the resolution only passed by like 20 or 30 votes or whatever. That's not a good sign to me for the outcome of the impeachment hearings themselves. But, you know, we're at where we're at now. We are 7 days away from Joe Biden's inauguration. And the next week is going to be one of the craziest weeks in modern American history. I cannot stress enough. I must reiterate just how serious what happened last Wednesday was. That is the biggest, craziest act of terrorism committed against the United States since 9/11. Since like Pearl Harbor, I guess. Pearl Harbor doesn't really count because I guess that was an act of war. But the fact that there were armed protesters that were prepared to take hostages and execute heads of state by their own admission. The fact that those people were allowed to be within only like 40 feet of the people that they were talking about running down on in no small part due to the fact that a significant portion of them happen to be off-duty law enforcement and military. I must repeat that law enforcement in this country overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump in the 2016 elections. They voted for Trump 85%. And that doesn't mean that the other 15% voted for Hillary Clinton. I think it was like 17%, or I'm sorry, 7%. I can't math. 7% voted for the Libertarian Party, for Gary Johnson, something like that. So, conservatives and right-wingers are off in the trees. They're there where they're at, and they're pretty much unreachable. But what I would like to stress to the liberals watching me right now is that this is the America that you live in. This is the America that you have been living in. This is what we marched over the last summer for, is to demonstrate what we already knew, but what a lot of you are now finding out in the aftermath of what happened last Wednesday is that some of those that work forces are the same that burnt crosses. America was established as a white supremacist colony, and that's what it continues to be to this day. The police are not going to help you. The police are not here to protect you. The police are here to protect Capitol. The Republicans and the Democrats do not care about working class voters. Andy Harris, the Republican Maryland representative, does not listen to his own constituents. These people exist in their own little enclaves in Howard County and Salisbury and DC and all these other things, all these nice areas far away from you and far away from the consequences of their beliefs and their positions and their votes, because they are, at the end of the day, accountable to no one, right? The fact of the matter is that people like Matt Gaetz, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, people like Madison Cawthorn, people like Andy Harris, their constituency are even more radicalized now. What they are seeing is not having their eyes open to the truth, but they're just seeing what they can excuse as more liberal conspiracies, more liberal attacks on their president and their way of life. Not having the self-awareness to understand that their way of life is literally just white supremacy. But, you know, a lot of them actually are aware of that and don't care. This is why I say the United States government cannot be reformed. You are not going to wrest power from people using the system that they already control to enrich themselves and give themselves more power. You are not going to vote these people into giving their money away or their power away. It's just not going to happen. They already control the terms of the ways in which you vote. Case in point, you have people like Kamala Harris who want to keep nonviolent offenders locked up. And if you're locked up, you can't vote. If you're a felon, you can't vote. If you're an undocumented immigrant, you can't vote. It doesn't matter if you've been in this country 30, 40, 50 years. If you ain't got papers, you ain't voting. We need to seriously, and I mean very seriously, reconsider our values when it comes to the ways that we allow ourselves to be governed in this country. Because look at the rhetoric that the right were using. Look at the rhetoric that those people were using on Wednesday. They are ungovernable. They refuse to be governed by what they perceive as tyranny and, overbearing forms of power. So think about that. Kwame Ture said that when right-wingers oppose something, when you have a lunatic right-winger who is anti-abortion, what does he do? he bombs an abortion clinic or he assassinates an abortion doctor, right? And people on the left or more liberal-minded or socialist-minded people like me, there are no channels for us to enact that level of political violence, right? If one of us went and killed George Zimmerman, we would go to jail for life and probably be killed in jail. If one of us went and decided we wanted to kill, and I'm speaking purely hypothetically, I'm not advocating for political violence, obviously, that's TOS, but if one of us decided to go and kill one of the police officers that killed Breonna Taylor or George Floyd or any number of people who have been killed by police, we wouldn't even make it to our day in court, right? Look at Michael Reinhold, the man who killed the right-winger and the right-wing death squad in the form of U.S. Marshals that Donald Trump sent after him to assassinate him. They were so gung-ho about lacing him, riddling him full of bullets, that they almost shot like 6 innocent bystanders in that shootout. So, you need to understand that the government will not help you. The police will not protect you. And it's on us to help and protect ourselves. Something that blacks and indigenous people in this country have known since this country's inception. But I'm starting to repeat myself now. I might do a stream. I'm going to end it here, I think. Thanks to everyone who watched. I appreciate all of my new followers and such. I might play some Mortal Kombat or something in a minute. I don't know. I haven't decided. I'm hungry, though, so I'm probably going to grab a bite to eat before I come back on here to stream again. But that's all I got about this topic for now. Let me make sure there's nothing else happening really quick in terms of... votes or anything like that. Okay, yeah, so there's nothing else really going on. All right, thanks everyone. I'll be back, if not later today. I'll see you probably for another RNH stream, another Demon Hour stream tonight. If not tonight, then I will see you all tomorrow.